I don't think there was a single Marvel property post-Endgame that I was more let down by than Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It was such a general letdown, not just because it's only 6 episodes, but they squandered the ability very early on to write a good, compelling series that focused on not only the death of Captain America, well, effective death, rather, but they also started up a subplot with Bucky making amends for being the Winter Soldier as a way to cope with his PTSD. And they just give up on it basically after the first episode, to the point where it's like the last thing that happens in the season, where they have him make amends with the one guy that they set it up to be as like the most important. For the vast majority of the show, he's just a backseat character in his own story. He makes almost no contribution other than just being there as a extra body to fill the scene and have him just spit out dialogue while they're either going about their investigations or whatever it happens to be that they're doing at the time. There's never a point where he's treated as a serious character other than for the maybe 5 total times when he's allowed to be a serious character. And even then, those times are so short-lived that they effectively get nothing out of it. They end up just sweeping it under the rug, or it makes no difference to the entirety of the story. And some of the worst offending aspects of the show are that no one ever seems to actually know what they're doing or understand how they want to proceed in their various arcs or just subplots. Certain people are just tacked on and add effectively nothing to the story or part of the world building. The actual plot of the story is so wildly boring, it just doesn't matter what happens because there's nowhere that this story can go that it can finish without being preachy or just a throwaway story at the end of the day. Probably the biggest problem with the show is the fact that they make it far more about Falcon, but they don't make it about Falcon and his struggle to live up to Captain America or be worthy of the title. So much of it is just lip service to the fact that Steve is gone and people will want another Captain America. When they talk about Steve in this show, they don't talk about him as an individual person. They talk about him as Captain America. They don't talk about how Steve's morals or stances on political issues, especially around civil war and the whole idea of control from the government or anything else, affects how he acted as a hero. There's no point in which they say that Steve wouldn't want this because, and then implement knowledge they have about Steve as a person. It's always just as the idea of Captain America, to the point where it doesn't actually matter what Steve wants or says. All they care about is who's using the shield, how it's being used, and whether or not it aligns with whatever grievance they have with the world. One thing that's really disappointing, especially about Falcon, is the show isn't really about Falcon as a person, or even just how he is as a hero. It's far more often just about whatever real-life political race grifting or victim Olympics that they want to talk about. And it just doesn't make any sense when you know the context. They don't take into account the fact that he has connections with Stark Industries. He doesn't reach out to anyone other than Sharon. And even then, it's just because they wanted a girl boss moment with the big reveal in the final episode, to the point where you just don't care. Because she's been there for maybe less than a 6 of the episodes. Like, she's just there in intermittent scenes to the point where it just doesn't matter what happens to her, because there is literally no aspect of her involvement that matters until the very end of the show, and even then you just don't care. And there were so many segments where instead of just addressing the actual issues in the show, all they would do is bust out the whole, America big bad because racism, just because. They treat it as if there has literally never been anything remotely positive to happen to black people or any racial background because reasons. They just act like nothing has ever happened that has ever benefited anyone except white people. They even go out of their way to add scenes and segments where things happen to Bucky and Sam that have no place in the story. There's literally a scene in which fucking Bucky Barnes and Sam Wilson, very well-known members of the Avengers, are stopped by the cops so they can have like a implied racist cops segment, which then just gets swept under the rug after like a few seconds when people remember, oh yeah, that's right, there's no reason for any of this to happen because these are very well-known public figures. And it's just so stupid. The vast majority of the show, it's not even them being superheroes, it's just them walking around, going place to place, either complaining between each other, constantly bickering, or they insert some segment about racism or legacy, but they don't treat it as if it's anything serious. And it's just so disappointing because I actually like Sam and Bucky. I thought they were cool superheroes, and we didn't actually get to see a whole huge amount about them, even in things like Civil War, where Captain America and, all his associates got to have a lot more screen time. Despite Bucky being, a very large plot point in not only the Winter Soldier, but also of Civil War, him as a character is generally kind of left ambiguous. We don't know a whole lot about him. We don't get to see him act independently. He and Sam are often just kind of there to fill out the roster. And this would have been an amazing time to explore them as people, and for them to really just shine in as individual characters. But they don't do that. Like I said, it's just them going place to place, bickering about something, and then sliding in some real-world political shit that doesn't matter. This show could have been one of the most action-packed, drama-rich segments of the MCU, but they didn't do anything with it. What they did end up doing with it is just using it as a way to preach. Like, the entire focus on the Super Soldier Serum doesn't make sense, and we'll get into that later in the video. Especially the whole Black Captain America Super Soldier program. The show can't even decide who is the villain and who we're supposed to root for. They switch around not only the tone, but the overall structure of the show so much that 1 second, someone's a good, honest, hopeful individual who's just doing what they think is right. And then the next one, they're a cartoonishly evil idiot who's just spouting platitudes that mean nothing and are so half thought out that you can't even imagine that anything they say is serious, because they just don't know what they're saying, or they're ignoring the most open and obvious factors that contradict or impede how their agenda and worldview could be implemented. Ooh, man. The show was such a fucking pain to watch. Let's just fucking get this over with. The first episode does not have a very strong opening for the series as a whole. I initially started just writing down problems or inconsistencies I saw as I went, and it got to the point where I was finding more than a single problem per minute of the episode. And it just starts off with some of the most ridiculous stuff. Like, this is certain things they've had since fucking Iron Man 1 that they haven't messed up to this point. They lose the aircraft they're going after right away because I guess when they got hijacked, it just disappeared despite, radar existing. Then there's a fucking conversation between this guy Torres and Sam, but Torres doesn't have a headset or a radio on him. He's just, like, talking in general, and somehow Sam is hearing him. When Red Wing starts cutting into the plane with his laser, or that is somehow capable of cutting out like the entirety of a door on a military grade airplane in just a few seconds. No one ever hears anything like, say, the wind rushing through the holes being cut through it, or the smell of burning metal, because reasons, I guess. Shit like this keeps going on, like little details that really just make things fall apart, or things that in the earliest properties of the MCU they didn't overlook, and even in some of the later bits, because it just didn't make sense for them to overlook, and it kept the overall universe feeling grounded, at least in somewhat, while still allowing, for the whole superhero aspect of it. And one of the things that happens is Sam has a visor that allows him not only to have X-ray vision, and that's not necessarily a problem itself. The problem is somehow he can manage to detect who is hostile by just looking at them through the walls of the airplane. Like, it just tells him he's hostile. As if there's some, like, code who is registers a hostile and who isn't. And you didn't even need to put it in because you can see them beating the hostage up. But apparently, that wasn't clue enough, I guess. And for some reason, there were literally only 2 people on this entire cargo plane. There's the guy piloting it, and there's the guy in the back getting his ass beat by the LAF. Like, why I don't know if that's standard procedure or not, but it seems like quite a bit of oversight. And after everything, after they start beating on the guy and they start taking the hostage out, they just get wingsuits on in less than a minute. Oh, and also they have wingsuits apparently. They don't show us where they got them from. They don't tell us how they get them. And they all just get them on right away. Sam just immediately leaves the plane to let it crash. Now, granted, he might not know that the person on the inside of the cockpit is dead, but also, why wouldn't he notice when the plane just began to suddenly drop and really start losing altitude? I don't think you have to be a super genius to be able to realize that when a plane suddenly dips, losing altitude rapidly, even if it stabilizes after a while from like fucking autopilot, maybe something bad happened. Sam could have radioed back Torres and said, hey, I had to leave the plane, but I think the pilot's dead or something. You know, something like a fucking hero would do. But he doesn't. He just lets it crash and doesn't do anything about it. Then we get this big, long chase scene where he's going through the canyon, chasing after everyone in the wingsuit. And for some reason, he doesn't narrow his wings back after entering a narrow passageway, after doing it not only 10 seconds earlier the last time they came by a narrow area. And then, out of nowhere, like, it literally just pops up. A fucking helicopter just, like, gets in his way. And the guys on the ground, you know, the people who are part of the military, who are there supposedly to help, they don't. They just tell them, like, oh, you're approaching hostile airspace, when they need to remind everyone that, oh, yeah, there's somewhat of a ticking clock. Because, once again, I guess radar just isn't a thing in this universe all of a sudden. I mean, there was radar in Iron Man 1. It's how he gets into a fight with the F-22s, but for some reason in this series, it's just gone, and they don't explain why. Now, this might be a nitpick or whatnot, but I'm going to keep this in here. Somehow, Red Wing, this tiny-ass little glider drone, not only has a laser, a machine gun, and also 2 missiles in the exact same slot on it, but he also doesn't appear to have an actual form of momentum on it. Like, he doesn't have a jet engine, he doesn't have some turbine or anything. He's just like a little glider, but he just keeps perpetually moving as if he's got, free range movement like you'd see on an Iron Man suit. Now, granted, they try to, like, hand wave this by saying he's Stark Tech, so he's complicated, and that's why Sam doesn't like them messing with Red Wing. But at the same time, it opens questions like, yeah, just because it's Stark Tech doesn't mean it's, like, literally magic. There's still, a certain amount of space you need to keep all of its components together so that it fits within a certain space or whatnot. At least with the Iron Man suit, you can have at least some semblance of understanding where things go, because they're built up and around whatever they're on top of. War Machine and Iron Man, they tend to have, like, more raised shoulders and stuff, because that's where, like, a lot of their weapons can deploy from, as well as, like, seating compartments around it. It's not literally like a skin-tight, form-fitting aerodynamic suit. Whereas Red Wing is just this tiny little glider thing. He's got like a small arsenal just crammed into maybe at most 5 feet. Then we get more helicopters, not a single warning about those at any point. As the fighting goes on, Torres just chimes in with this thing about Sam being outnumbered, as if it's just now starting to become outnumbered, as if he hasn't been outnumbered literally the entire mission, because Torres is a fucking idiot and doesn't contribute anything to the story. And when Sam flies through and all these explosions are going on at him, he's never hit by shrapnel or anything. He never gets thrown off course or has any problem with the combat. And this, going back to fucking Iron Man, they at least acknowledge that, shrapnel is a thing. While Tony wasn't really direct impacted by a bomb, he still got hit with the shrapnel from it. And it's not like Sam is covered head to toe in something like an Iron Man suit. He's quite exposed with very little on him overall, other than like his, wingsuit. And just nothing comes from it. You could excuse this kind of thing in certain examples. Like, let's think back to fucking Civil War, where, Captain America gets grenaded in the face, and it's fine. Sure, we can argue that, but at the same time, it's still a lot more of a small controlled explosion. Whereas this one is, it's like a fucking missile, but nothing comes from it. Also, somehow, you can reroute and bypass bullet holes in the thruster of a wingsuit. Now, I'm not an engineer. I'm not someone with extremely detailed knowledge about avionics and whatnot, but I don't think you can reroute around a bullet hole, especially while you're still in mid-flight, in mid-combat. Once the fucking mission's over, we see Sam just tinkering with Red Wing on a table out in public. And I guess now, not only is Sam an engineer, but he's an engineer that can work on Stark-level tech, but apparently Air Force messes him up a lot. Okay, well then why are you capable of doing it? Because if Tony was, paying for your fucking college education or explaining how everything worked, I feel like that would have come up at some point. Even if it's just like as a passing message. This isn't something like you can just hand wave in. You're adding an ability that we have no reason to believe that he had for any reason whatsoever. I mean, Rhodey's not a fucking expert on Stark Tech just because he wears a fucking War Machine suit all the time. So why is Sam? Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then we get this fucking, like, exposition dump about fucking Antifa when this Asian dude that he's talking to pulls out his phone and starts pointing the camera around it. And somehow their symbol just, like, randomly shows up on the footage. But you can't see it in real life somehow, which doesn't make sense. Which that would imply that it's something like an augmented reality game or some shit like that. Like, like fucking Pokemon Go. But no, it's just there, and it's just like this big exposition dump about why we should care about this organization. Because I guess they had us doing the whole actual military operation beforehand, but now it's just some completely separate aspect of the show. Kind of opens the question, why having the fucking opening segment? And when we hear about like what they believe, it's just this normal shit that you can hear from like any sort of internet commie group. It's always like, oh, we're the good guys because every time progress is made, that means it's regression for someone. What's weird is it comes from Sam of all people. So you're saying that if someone makes any progress, someone else has to suffer from it in some form of regression? Okay, Sam, then who the fuck regressed when you have to become a superhero? Because if everyone is going to somehow be a victim because someone else isn't a victim, then it doesn't really make any sense for you to be all high and mighty, because it sounds like you're kind of part of the fucking problem. And the whole scene, it is just a super stiff exchange, especially from the Asian dude. I don't know if it is because of the actor's ability, the fucking script that he was given, or what, but either way, there used to be fucking standards with the MCU, and I have no idea why they just decided to get rid of all of them. We see Sam, when he's given back the shield, talk about how great of a hero he was, and less than 10 seconds later, he's talking about how they don't need more heroes because, I guess, Steve training the other heroes didn't happen. And now because Steve's gone, you basically can't do anything with the shield because, oh, well, it's not Steve. It's like, yeah, he's not Steve. Was there some reason that we should have believed that somehow Steve was just never going to die? He was just going to be around forever to be like the paragon of what a hero should be? I don't understand what they want us to gain from this. Because they act as if somehow change is bad, but we also shouldn't idolize Captain America or in the symbol that he was. Especially later in the show when that's all they do. They just constantly shit on the idea of Captain America as if he's some terrible thing. But they can't seem to figure out if they think he's bad or if he's a good. It's all over the fucking place and you can't figure out what you're supposed to glean from how this fucking story goes about. If you can't have a consistent tone or message, you don't actually have a story here. You just have a collection of events playing out one by one, and we're just supposed to hope that it makes sense to someone. It is so jarring. It ruins the pacing. It ruins the consistency. It just fucking highlights the incompetence of the people who made this fucking show. Then we get shown, like, this memorial to Steve Rogers, and as well as, like, to World War II in general, where they are putting the shield. And there's just one random fucking propaganda poster, and it's got, like, some commie nonsense about supporting the war effort, but also not talking about it. That doesn't make sense. Support it, but stay silent about it. Which is, do you want us to support it, or do you want us to pretend like nothing is happening with this? It is almost comical how contradictory and nonsensical the messages in this show are. And they put them in the most random spaces. It either grinds the fucking scene to a halt, or it just destroys itself with just the most minimal amount of thinking. This is all right after the shield was put into a case, and like less than 3 minutes afterwards, it has gone from being on the stage to being in a anchored fucking display piece at this memorial. And it's like, how? Now, we could say random time jump for it. So did Sam just stick around, wait for the event to end, and then watch the guys go put it in the actual proper display just because they could? Or was this some just weird decision? So you just waited around just so you could, like, brood over it? Like you're fucking Batman on a gargoyle overhanging fucking Gotham City? If you were really so conflicted and uncertain about what you want to do with the shield, why the fuck did you agree to give it back? If you're just going to look at it as if you feel like you have some responsibility attached to it still. Then we're given this flashback scene of a mission that Bucky Barnes was on when he was still the Winter Soldier under Hydra and the Soviets' control. And there's this guy, he's just a civilian caught in the crossfire, wrong place, wrong time. And he goes from like almost sliding the key in to just not even putting it close to the actual locked surface. Now, yeah, if you're scared and you're jittery or whatnot, sure, that can mess up your movements. But you're not going to just start moving like 1 to 3 inches to somewhere else to try to do something. It was just a weird choice, and I am certain they could have gotten a better take to put into it. Now, one thing I noticed with this particular scene that really caught my eye is, at this point in time, this is around the 80s because, well, we'll get into that a little bit because it has to be around the 80s. Because not only are the Soviets around, but because of the equipment that's there, Bucky, who is a Soviet/Hydra agent, or at least a Soviet branch of Hydra, is in the 80s, uses a West German-designed Sig Sauer P226. Now, like I said, that's a gun that was designed in West Germany, which was not under the control of the Soviets, and by extension, Hydra. Hydra wouldn't become really embedded into the Americans in any significant power projecting force for quite a while, especially after the Soviets fell. And it just opens up the question, why does an almost exclusively Soviet agent have a brand new Western designed gun? Like, how did he get his hands on it? Sure, you could argue, like, smuggling and whatnot, but they made it pretty clear in The Winter Soldier that he was essentially a ghost agent, and they even talk about him using, like, an actual, like, Russian weapon to shoot through the target that Natasha was guarding in The Winter Soldier.
Soviet slug, no rifling. Bye-bye bikini.
But then why would he be using a weapon that wasn't actively available to the Soviets at the time? That just opens up more questions than it answers. I think what ended up happening is they just picked a random gun and didn't consider the implications of it. So, we can maybe throw this thing out, but I still think it's strange. Now, after this whole flashback scene, we get to see Bucky in a therapist's office, and we find out that apparently he's there because he has a condition put onto his pardon. Now, there is an enormous problem with that. You cannot place a condition on a pardon. According to Congress.gov's text of the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the President cannot impose conditions on pardons. It doesn't even actually make sense when you think about it, even if we fucking hand-wave that bit and say that it doesn't apply in this universe. Would that not literally just open up the pardon system to, like, more corruption? Oh yeah, I did this terrible thing, and it was a form of treason or high crime against the United States, but I basically paid a fine, and now I'm pardoned forever. It's like, fucking why? How do you even get to the point where you think, oh, well, we can justify him being in it by placing a fucking condition on his pardon? Here's an idea. Don't put him on pardon. Just put him on a fucking, like, a parole list or some shit. Have it circulate through, like, the fucking UN or whatever or global fucking governing structure you want to. You're specifically putting it behind a presidential pardon, which, one, that doesn't protect him from, say, people in Germany, Russia, or anywhere else that he operated as the Winter Soldier. It literally just frees him up from criminal prosecution in America, which means that if Bucky leaves America, he's still a criminal. It is just an oversight that they could have completely avoided. Like, I almost would have rather had him be an actual prisoner than this. Like I said, you could 100% write yourself around this, but you limited it in such scope and you added more problems that you actually solved. And during the process of proofreading, hopefully they proofread this, they could have just changed a couple of little details and this entire problem wouldn't exist. But no, that's apparently too fucking much to expect from people. It is just so frustrating having to see such fucking amateur mistakes coming from not only Disney, but from the people who have been working on the cinematic universe for like 10 plus years at this point. We finally get to see some more of a family life for a member of the Avengers that's away from, actual avenging. Apparently, Sam's family is nearly broke, barely keeping their fishing boat because I guess Tony, S.H.I.E.L.D., the Air Force, or who the fuck ever wasn't paying Sam during his time as an Avenger. So now his family boat is weighing them down. and he's in like tremendous financial debt and about to go fucking bankrupt. Most of the story around him as like a civilian is about trying to get this fucking boat fixed. And it has not only a fucking ridiculous resolution, but it has an absolutely enormous question following it. Why the fuck didn't Sam go to Pepper or Happy and say, hey, I don't ask you guys for just about anything, but can you help me pay for the repairs on my boat so, like, my sister and her family can just not be fucking broke? This really exacerbates another issue in a different show where fucking Tony made Bruce a private fucking bar so that he could get drunk on an island as Hulk, but he wouldn't pay for a couple of repairs for Sam's fucking boat because apparently, according to this show, Tony's just a fucking dick. Then we get more fucking commie propaganda about the banks and big business, as if banks are literally just refusing to cater to the poor people of the world, because I guess credit card debt isn't a thing in the MCU, and they wanted to make sure everyone knew how oppressed and sad the world that Sam lives in. But whatever, you know. Then we get to see Bucky going on this date with a lady at a fucking sushi bar, and they're playing Battleship, and it does not correspond with the board that the lady has, which means they just slap shit together to make it look as if they were playing, but they couldn't go into enough detail just to design the set so it wasn't like a giant flaw there. You know, because I guess work is hard. Then we get to see fucking Antifa doing something finally, and they're just gathering outside in the open. They just rob a bank, and he jumps out the window with these two fucking big old bags of money or whatever, and it's only after he lands does the fucking alarm go off, because apparently, like, when he was robbing it didn't go off, and I guess there was just no guards, anything whatsoever to stop him. And not only that, they're gathering out in the open, and they're getting, like, these pings on an app on their phone, and somehow these guys are international terrorists who are going around on orchestrating this whole fucking uprising movement, what the fuck ever you want to call it, and they are somehow just completely avoiding being tracked or having their app decrypted. How the fuck are you people hiding this? How are you getting away with this if you're literally broadcasting to just about everyone in the vicinity that you're doing some big ass crime, and you're literally handing out like these fucking hockey masks denoting you as a member of your fucking group? Imagine you're in like a law-abiding city. I know that's rare these days, and you just decide to send out a ping. It's like, yo, everyone, I'm about to release some fucking anthrax, and everyone around is just like, yeah, cool, here, we'll help, we'll even identify ourselves as part of your group. And then, like, somehow you're just never found, but you managed to give it out to every phone you can find, and just everyone just seems to be on it. It feels like there's not a whole lot of police work that would be required to really hunt down these people, but I guess they're masterminds or some shit, or at least that's what they want us to think they are. It's fucking stupid.
Holy fuck, you're stupid. You're such a fucking idiot. Jesus Christ, you're dumb. Dumb, dumbity dum, dumbity dum, dumb. Fuck.
Then we get to see this bit where Sam and his sister are at the bank and asking for money, you know, as a loan to help fix their boat. The scene just evolves into more racism and the fact that Sam is a celebrity. And despite having government contracts and existing business and a history of banking with that particular bank through multiple generations of their family, they just don't qualify for the loan because they don't even really tell you why. It's just, oh, you don't qualify for the loan because, well, we just decided. As if every single thing that they listed off, you know, the fucking government contracts, the existing business, and a history of being reliable members of the bank is somehow not the most abundant set of green flags that any bank could ever hope to get. He brings up, like, that there's goodwill involved with it, but still, he never attempts to contact fucking Pepper or Happy or anyone at fucking Stark Industries because they need this contrived fucking situation for Sam and his sister, and they just can't be bothered, I guess, to do the most bare bones work to realize that this situation doesn't fucking work, especially since Sam is a veteran. He's extremely famous. He's got fucking government contracts. Do you know how many people would kill to be able to go to the bank asking for a loan and be able to bring up the fact that they have government contracts? You don't just get government contracts just because you have a business. You get government contracts when you're good at doing something. It just doesn't fucking make any sense. They were basically forcing him to be poor because he got blipped. As if half the world's population, 4 billion people coming back and just reclaiming their money, they somehow will like do a great shakeup to the world. I am certain if you did a deep dive, you could find plenty of bank accounts, trust, or what the fuck ever from people that are dead or aren't actively being used in the moment, where it's not like the money just literally doesn't exist anymore, or you're having like this enormous infusion of extra money. It's literally the same amount of money. It's just now being activated and moved around. I don't know. I'm not an economist. This just feels like the most contrived thing. And all of it, every single bit of this could have been avoided if Sam just went to fucking Pepper and asked for help. And this is the first episode. All of this is like the first episode. Oh, there was not a single bit of this show that gets better from here on in. Alright, so episode 2 is primarily focused on just introducing us to John Walker, who, for a little while at least, is going to be the new Captain America. And one thing we find out really early on is that the Antifa group has somehow made themselves all super soldiers by creating their own version of the super soldier serum, because apparently you can just do that. In the 80 years between World War II to current time, somehow the entire US government, no matter how much money they threw at it, how much research they put into it, no matter what resources they put on the project, it just never went anywhere, and these random punks just somehow figured out how to make it. And when we get to the actual explanation in a few episodes, we'll go through why it's fucking retarded, and we'll just get to it when we get to it. We get to see John Walker being introduced as Captain America, and he's going around, he's doing this big old press tour, and it ends up being a whole lot of nothing, because initially we're hyping this guy up all the time like he's the greatest thing ever. He has an amazing service record. He's got 3 Medal of Honors. Fun fact, you can't get 3 Medal of Honors. You can't even get 2 Medals of Honor. They just made it a rule. You can only get 1. Now, if John's got one from each different branch, I don't know if that's the case. They don't say that, so I'm going to assume that's not what happened. One thing that I really noticed in this show, and you can almost justify it because he's the secondary person on the title, but just about no one in this show seems to give a damn about what happens to Bucky or anything what he thinks, except when they need it to reinforce their own position. This episode is really when they start just harping on, in every chance they get, how Captain America's shield is so important because it's supposed to be a symbol that represents something bigger for the nation as a whole. They'll occasionally mention Steve and say, like, this isn't what he wanted, this isn't what he would do, but they never, ever talk about what he would do or use any of the time and experience these characters have between Steve and themselves to actually explain what they believe should be done. It's always just, no, this isn't good enough, or blah, blah, blah. We have to do it my way, which will extend the plot because reasons. And one thing I notice is they seem to worship the shield the way they're constantly talking about it. It's more like the shield is important, but it only matters who is carrying it when they are doing what I want them to do. And it's to the point where it's clearly not even about being a hero at this point. It's literally just about who holds it, which really diminishes the whole idea that Captain America was not only important to the nation as a symbol of virtue or heroism, or just as a good standard for what people should strive to be. It's literally just the marketing that they care about, and it's ridiculous. And it is such a shallow way to approach the idea, because someone like Captain America, he's not just supposed to be the guy who holds the shield. He's the moral foundation of the Avengers. He's the guy who says all the things that people don't want to hear, but they need to hear. But nobody in this show does that. They only do it tangentially and half-assedly when they want to do some moral grandstanding or want to be able to just slap down another person and act like they're better just because they disagree how the other person is going about being Captain America. We also get to see a constant theme, and granted, it seems to go away slightly as the show goes on, but it doesn't necessarily get better. Where Sam decides that he's just going to get uppity randomly and make a vaguely racist connection between him and Bucky because Bucky happens to be getting upset about something. and it's completely out of pocket, and this stuff just shows up all over the show. It's just constantly thrown in your face like, oh, you're criticizing me or making a valid point, well, you must be racist. And it's just infuriating to listen to because it ends up just wasting time in the story, and it accomplishes nothing. No character ever changes their outlook based on what they hear from someone getting upset and talking about racism. It just drags down the story and accomplishes fucking nothing. As the episode goes on, when they finally manage to track down Antifa, it's not like the CIA or military intelligence of any sort. Red Wing just happens to do it. Red Wing is just a fucking plot device in this. He does whatever is needed for him to do to be able to handwave any small problem that might be available, unless they want to have him basically just be a prop for a joke or something else. It doesn't endear us to him. It's just like, can you shut up about Red Wing and like do your fucking job? I know how fucking disjointed this entire video is going to sound. I'm literally rattling this off in like the order they happen. Bucky and Sam cannot figure out whether or not they dislike each other and hate just working with them. It's always just like these little scenes that accomplish nothing, and it's not cute, it's not cool, it doesn't end up building them as a team or anything like that. It's just them bickering and hating each other, and then being completely casual and working together as if they were, a team for the last, 7 to 8 years before this. The tone is just so inconsistent that you just wonder, why do you even bother having these little interactions if you can't keep them consistent throughout the entire show? Because it makes the characters seem so petty and as if they want to just make a problem just because they can't. Like passive-aggressive catty bitches who have literally nothing better to do. And while they're bickering in this one particular scene, while they're chasing down fucking Antifa, no one hears them. They're not whispering or doing hushed tones or anything like that. It's just standard talking volume and nobody hears them. And obviously meant to pad the time because these episodes are somehow really long and really short, where things will be going on for a long period of time, but absolutely nothing related to the story will be happening, and then vice versa. Well, nothing will happen, but you'll just speed through the episode. And I don't understand how you can mess up a show's pacing this badly, because it's literally just create the plot line, create the events, throw in the action scenes, throw in the dialogue, make it all sound not ridiculous. This show could not be worse at it. Then they start chasing down the truck as it escapes with all the supplies that Antifa has picked up, and they just keep going. And eventually, Bucky gets on a truck. But here's the thing, he's in the truck that's in front of the secondary truck, but at no point does the secondary truck say, hey, some dude just climbed into the back with the supplies and is doing who knows what.
Is your idiot brain getting fucked by stupid?
And luckily for them, they don't have to, because as soon as Bucky gets in there and he looks for fucking Princess Dindu, we'll get to her eventually, because he thinks she's a hostage or whatnot, and she just fucking one-shots him, sends him flying. And this, oh man, this is also an enormous problem between primarily Bucky, but just about every member of the fucking main cast, where the most random, inexperienced individuals can somehow overpower these trained military assassins and soldiers, and they just let it happen. Princess Dindu doesn't just hit Bucky, she fucking telegraphs the shit out of it, and he does absolutely nothing to stop her. And then, as the fight goes on, they're fighting on top of the truck and whatnot, and all the action's going on. Bucky is just getting constantly humiliated. He's constantly getting overpowered and humiliated. He's getting beat up and held down by these two random individual goons, which, sure, they have super soldier serum, supposedly. It doesn't give them any of the physical features that are normally associated with, taking the super soldier serum, increase his physical appearance or whatnot, and they say that it's just a side effect of the thing because it's more subtle or whatnot. It's not. It's just because they didn't want to take the time to hire someone who looks like they could be at least a little bit of a threat. Then when fucking Battlestar and new Captain America show up and they start fighting, they just also have the worst luck fighting. Not even just worst luck, they just basically let everyone beat the shit out of them. And they do the absolute bare minimum to fight back or even pretend like they are being a part of the actual situation itself. They're away from their fucking keyboards and they're getting attacked and they just don't know it. And these two are hardened veterans. One of these guys supposedly has 3 medals of honor, and he doesn't pull out his gun, which they seem to have made it extra floppy for some reason. Like, anytime you could see him below his waist walking, the damn thing flops all over the place as if it's supposed to be some visual cue like, oh man, this guy shouldn't be trusted because he carry a gun, which is weird because they try their absolute damnedest to fucking villainize John in this show, no matter what scene is, to the point where there's literally no reason not to like him until they literally force him to change as a character between sentences from being a well-meaning, a patriotic guy to just this fucking childish asshole who cannot stand the idea that nobody is respecting him as Captain America, despite him doing literally nothing up to that point. And John, he's got this gun to go with his shield so he can fight back. He hits like one singular dude somewhere in like the stomach, and he just walks it off because who the fuck knows why. Then as the fight goes on, there's this scene where this one fucking Antifa super soldier, he fucking jumps and just brute forces his way through a sign that was going to knock him off the truck. Sure, I get the idea what you're trying to go through, but that's not how that fucking works. It doesn't matter if he breaks through the sign. The truck they are on is going like 50 plus miles an hour. It doesn't matter if you break through that. You're still not going to just land back on it because you slowed down as you were hitting it. If you wanted to have this scene, but you didn't want to have something stupid like that happen, have the guy fucking jump over the sign. If you're gonna give a super soldier powers, a little bit of athleticism, it wouldn't fucking hurt to see. You could have him drop down the side and just hang off of the edge till he passes. You could do a whole lot of things, but they don't do it. They just fucking break through the wall because they don't know how fucking physics works, and they just hand wave anything and everything that could possibly be a detriment to these characters for like the entire show. Specifically the Antifa members, because everything either works out for them or they are in the absolute right and everyone against them is evil. They are literally Mary Sue's until the very end of the season, when all of a sudden they just now start having the consequences of their actions appear. During the fight, Bucky gets knocked off to the side and he starts hanging underneath the truck that they're fighting on. And at one point, Sam is just off to the side flying away, being a whole fucking useless person. He's there for like the majority of the fight, while fucking John and Battlestar are fucking actually trying to get something done. He literally just gives up on the fight. He rolls under the truck, tumbles into Bucky, brings him down with him. It basically boils down to Sam literally just gave up on the fight just because he could. He could have gone on the complete opposite direction and stayed in the fight and kept going and actually done something. But no, they needed a way to end the fight and let the super soldiers get away, because if these guys were competent, you know, these military men, the people who have done this for the majority of their lives as adults, if they were competent enough to stop a group of fucking Portland natives who have never fought a real fight in their lives, then the fucking plot couldn't happen. Then we get to a big old scene that's just Sam and Bucky walking along, and then they come get picked up by John and Battlestar. They start talking to each other. There was like no chemistry between any of these characters at any point for any reason. Everyone is so awkward and stiff, and to a certain extent you can understand with Sam and Bucky, especially talking to the new guys, but at the same time, Lamar, aka Battlestar, he's just kind of there. They make this kind of half-assed effort to show him being connected with John as friends, and then they like throw him away in, I think, at most 2 episodes from this point. I could be wrong, but it doesn't really matter either way, because other than him being the supportive friend, he doesn't have a character. He's just there. And you know, if you wanted to make John seem more like an outsider and have him be kind of difficult to get along with, giving him a black best friend just to have the black best friend get killed, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense other than a way to justify him murdering someone later on. Then we get to see a cut where Antifa gets to wherever the fuck they were going, and everything is literally already set up for them. They've got beds, they've got an internet connection, it's already all encrypted and good to go. The biggest problem I have with that is the fact that the computer system is just good to go, because when they get there, the guy just immediately starts hacking in the most generous term possible, because he's literally just poking at the keyboard or doing, you know, the generic move your fingers and it animates the thing. And somehow he manages to like erase their entire presence on the internet within like less than a minute of trying. You know, I can buy that for, say, a supervillain or something, especially one that's a technical genius. But these are just literally random dudes off the street who show up and just manage to have everything just go their way the second they need it to. And they frame it as if it is the most grassroots, voluntary support network they have around the world, and everything's just ready to go. And it begs the question, if these people can and not only house 10 plus people randomly, while the rest of the people that Antifa is pretending to represent are somehow either homeless or are without supplies to live on, it begs the question, why aren't the people who have the capabilities to set up these little camps for them just doing that anyways? I mean, it's not hard to do, as evidenced by the fact that they just do it. These people have relatively high technical knowledge to the point where they can literally, that at a random computer, they can just erase the entire presence of their group from the internet and through like databases and whatnot. But for some reason, they can't set up a couple extra beds or make a tent city. If you can't tell, the people who make this didn't really think a lot of this through.
Gasp.
Then we get a fucking passing mention of like everything they believe, and it's basically just, oh, we should like give up on trying to bring the world back to what it was before Thanos because everything was better under that like charity and whatnot. So we should just allow people to go wherever they want, do whatever they want, take whatever they want, just because they can. But, you know, fuck the other 4 billion people who literally showed up overnight, because this is never fleshed out. It's just, we should do these things because I want to do it. And if we don't do it, everyone is evil and I am better because I'm doing it anyways. It really just boils down to the fact that her biggest grievance is the fact that people are not exclusively focusing on the individual groups that she happens to be around at that exact individual moment. 4 billion people literally showed up overnight, and, you know, governments and everyone involved in the individual societies is trying to get things back up and running and put together again. And her biggest complaint is it's not literally happening fast enough. It's just commie nonsense all around. That's basically just give away all the free stuff. Of just let people go wherever they want. Ignore the chance that somebody could abuse this situation and, you know, hurt others or anything along that line, because that requires cognitive thinking ability. Then, oh boy, we get a bit of an expansion of the lore that is easily the worst part of this series, because it is used bullshit their way into a bunch of plot lines. It's just, there's a guy who was somehow part of it's a black guy who got to be part of a Captain America super soldier serum creation program, and the entire thing is literally just played for more racism. He's thrown in jail because he's one of the few people that it worked on. If Black Cap was being tested for being a super soldier, why didn't they do these tests on, say, Steve? Because Steve was a super soldier, but like right after his procedure, they steal all the remaining serum, it breaks, so they lose it, and the guy who knows how to make it dies, and apparently he didn't leave behind any sort of notes or any other way to recreate the serum. All the known serum is now gone, and they've had plenty of time to test Steve during the war, after he got back from being frozen. And if the serum they made worked on Black Cap, why didn't they just make more of it and try it on more people? If you can make it, and you know for a fact that it is successful in making at least one person a super soldier, there's no reason that you can't just keep doing that trial, victimizing this one guy, stealing his blood, locking him in prison, doing all these terrible things to him. It makes no sense, because for all you know, whatever test you're doing, it could compromise him as a subject. So you can't reliably run these tests without running the risk of just messing him up to the point where maybe it does something to his metabolism where the serum doesn't work for as long. It could be any number of things, but they don't bring this up. They talk about it as if it wasn't a huge deal to have more of the serum at all. The fact that they can make it and create new super soldiers is an enormous deal, because from what I understand, Bruce Banner's research is literally an attempt to try to make the super soldier serum a completely different way, which then leads to the Hulk. But if they could make more serum and test on Black Cap for 30 years, they had him for 30 years, why didn't they just make more of whatever they gave to him and then just keep giving it to different people? It makes absolutely no sense, and the entire thought process just falls apart with the most minimal amount of scrutiny. And this opens up another set of questions. How is it that someone with the powers of Captain America, super strength, super speed, super reflexes, all of this, if they couldn't catch Cap in his second movie when he was just determined enough to escape S.H.I.E.L.D. when it became compromised, how could they stop another one of him who not only has the same powers as him, but is one of the only people that the testing has worked on? They're not going to kill him because they needed him to keep running tests on him to the point where they needed to keep him for 30 years for some stupid reason. And later, we find out that he managed to somehow escape and go try to save his buddy later on. But somehow, he didn't do that while he was being tested on. Because this show is stupid. Then they get kicked out, the whole thing ends, and then they start bickering. It goes fucking nowhere. Then we get a racist cop scene for no reason. They play it as if they're there for Sam because he's black. And, this was fucking, 2020, so people were just okay with this kind of shit, and they thought that this was totally reasonable, and it wasn't completely out of character. Not only for a civilian to not immediately recognize an Avenger, but also to just immediately pull around the corner and just see a black guy being near a white guy, despite, from what we can tell, is kind of a low-income black neighborhood. Which you think would make them more suspicious of Bucky, because for all they know, this guy's a drug supplier trying to find some fresh mules or some shit. But no, it's literally just an ass pull to make you think that they're going after Sam because of racism. It's just a way to get him arrested. And then they bring up the whole thing where he missed the court-mandated therapy session, which is a condition of his pardon. Once again, you cannot put a condition on a pardon. And he just gets out right away because John pulls some strings or some shit. They don't actually go into details. I guess Captain America has legal pull now. Don't know why. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Then there's basically this couple therapy session follows right afterwards. And it's obviously just made to humiliate the male actors and the characters as a whole. But to its credit, we get a really good point that this show basically never touches again and completely forgets about. Bucky is mad at Sam for getting rid of the shield after Steve gave it to him because Steve trusted him to carry on his legacy, which makes Bucky think that Steve was wrong about Sam. And if Steve is wrong about Sam, what if he's wrong about Bucky? That is a fantastic question. That is a fantastic plot point to jump off of to allow for exploration of the characters as a whole. However, they do absolutely fucking nothing with it. Sam just avoids everything that they bring up. Just refuses to participate. And then they leave, they go out to the car, and they try to go do their own thing. New Captain America is waiting there for them. When he says, hey, guys, let's team up together. Let's work together. Let's be cool. There's no reason we gotta hate each other. Oh, let's go take down this Antifa group, and we'll just get this over with. But then they specifically say they don't feel comfortable targeting civilians. When they're not targeting civilians, they're in fact targeting co-conspirators and who are part of as established in the previous episode, a network of terror cells across all of Europe. But I guess they're just civilians now. Ignore the part where they stole from people and broke several laws. And then New Cap, he just gets mad and he's super hostile to them for no fucking reason. And it's literally there just to fucking make you hate him out of nowhere. And this is a minute or two after him being super nice. Also, Princess Dindu after this can't seem to figure out if she has a fucking accent or not, because reasons, who the fuck knows. And then they try to do this scene right near the end where this guy, he goes to hold off the cops when they're getting found, and they play it like it's some super sad heroic sacrifice, but it's not. It's literally a guy who runs towards the cops after letting them get out of the car with pull their guns on him. He has literally no plan and he just dies, and they try to make us sad about it. You shouldn't be. It's stupid. And yeah, the fucking episode ends there. Episode 3 is probably where things become the worst and most consistent afterwards. A lot of the things that kind of snuck in from the previous episodes start to really pile up and add on to themselves into a really haphazardly, half-heartedly made show. It's so focused on its own agenda that it really detracts from the overall consistency of not only the characters, the story, the stakes, the general tone, but the show as a whole. We start right out of the gate with this casual drop of a sort of infomercial that when everyone came back, things changed and, it's still difficult for everyone. And including to the point where I guess borders changed. They don't elaborate on that. They don't really go into extra detail about it. That feels like it's an important detail that probably should have gone into more depth about it, but it's just not. We start off with new Captain America and Battlestar going around investigating Princess Dindu and Antifa, and they're getting nowhere. Captain America is really intense and violent for no reason whatsoever, and he just starts beating on a guy. Basically we're told, oh, well, nothing's happening here. We have to go underground and do something else that we normally wouldn't do. It gets to the point where they're just saying, no, there's nothing we can do if we keep going the normal way. We got to ask Bucky and Sam for help. And then we cut to Bucky and Sam. They're just going to visit Zemo as they planned to in the previous episode. And not only do they get to go visit him, they just get to go directly into his cell to talk to him. I don't know what prisons are like in Germany where they find him, but I'm fairly certain you can't just walk into a prisoner's cell. There's the whole visitor section area, but this one's a strange cell. He's like behind a big old pane of glass, so maybe it's different. Then we hear them talking about Antifa and saying that, oh, we're going to need your help. They're doing this thing wrong, and we know you'll want to help us because you have a code. By the way, apparently Zemo has a code now. It wasn't there in Civil War, but he has it now. Then they do a prison break. He manages to get out somehow. We don't actually see how he does it. We don't see him get past the giant wall of glass, and there's no door that he can go through. He doesn't break it. He's just at the door that leads into the cell on the other side of the glass, somehow. Sam starts off not okay with the plan, but then randomly he's just okay with it because Bucky reminds him that they need him for the plan to work. That doesn't explain why he wasn't okay with it, but then now he is. Zemo gets the exposition done about the super soldier serum and talking about how important it is and how it gets around, but nobody points out the fact that they couldn't have made more serum in the exact same way because the only vial that survived after Captain America's surgery was destroyed in the first Captain America movie, and no one can make it because the formula is lost. So a bunch of people kept trying to do it, and they either kept messing up or they kept coming up with serums that weren't as good. When Zemo's going to get his stuff and he brings them along with him, he talks about how he hunted down people in Hydra who knew how to make serum, but no one knew how to make the serum. Even Zola, the guy who made the version they used on Bucky, didn't make enough to make more super soldiers. And the version that Howard Stark made was unstable and made the soldiers impossible to control, and that's why they didn't make more of it and why Zemo killed the other Winter Soldiers. So who exactly could he have hunted down, because Zemo didn't kill Zola, he didn't kill Howard, and no one else actually made any progress on it. So apparently he hunted down someone who didn't exist and we were never introduced to and we will not be introduced to. Who knows why. Then we gotta go to Madripoor to go talk to somebody who supposedly can help them find out how the serum's being made, who it's being made by, and how it got around. But they go in disguise, and for some reason no one that they ever interact with ever thinks it's weird that the brand new pardoned superhero, Bucky Barnes, is just a random bodyguard posing as if he's still the Winter Soldier when it's been made pretty clear he's an Avenger. And it doesn't take a huge leap in logic for people to think they probably wouldn't let him be an Avenger if he was still the Winter Soldier and couldn't be trusted. But they left that part out because thinking is hard. When they really need to sell that they're serious and need to make sure that people don't get suspicious and have their cover get blown, Bucky is all of a sudden a badass super soldier who can take down people with great ease, but for some reason he just couldn't do that when he was fighting Antifa. It's obvious from not just this episode, but every episode afterwards that they just refuse to let Bucky be confident or even as remotely capable of being a danger to anyone else in a fight because they needed a reason to be able to hand wave any sort of threat or consequence that could arise from him, fighting against these people. They talk about the serum more, and everybody in the area seems to know that it's a huge deal, that it's out and about. But that opens the question, why aren't more people trying to make it? It can't have been that hard if someone managed to crack it within a couple of years of trying. If someone could crack it within a couple of years of trying, I guess everyone else just gives up on the idea of doing it themselves, as if that is not an enormous chance for them to get a large sum of money. And I guess money is no longer a driving force for these people, despite it being made very clear that that's almost exclusively what they care about, at least in this particular area. While they're talking to Selby about trying to get information and sell Bucky off as a bodyguard / asset, Sam, being an absolute fucking amateur, not only brought his phone, but he also left it turned on.
What, are you retarded?
So that people could call him. Because what really makes this part stupid is the fact that they try to cram in racism into every aspect of the show whenever they can. But I guess our experienced black superhero didn't get quite enough education to know that you don't take your phone with you on an op, let alone do you fucking turn it on. Then they kill Selby and everything goes to shit and they just walk out off. Literally everyone in the entire city seems to know who killed Selby. The text doesn't tell them who did it or give any specific details to tell them what they look like or who they were last seen with. Everyone knows who did it right away, even if those people never saw Sam, Bucky, or Zemo beforehand. Also, Sam and Bucky went to see Zemo right before he escaped. Sam brought his phone with him during that time, and it's established that they're being tracked by the government in the previous episode, and people are trying to find Zemo at this very moment. Why haven't they been intercepted And they know that Bucky and Sam are trying to track down Antifa, despite them being told to not do it. So why weren't they immediately stopped by the American military from one of the bases that's in Germany? After they quote-unquote escape, they get picked up by Shannon and taken to an art gallery that she's running. And I guess the guards at this gallery don't want to claim 1,000 Bitcoin by killing or capturing Zemo, Sam, and Bucky. So why wouldn't they at least try to make a pass at it? If this was competently written, they would have the element of surprise, and this would be over in about a minute or so. While they're debriefing and trying to establish the next big plot point, for some reason, they try to make this pass at Bucky for daring to care about Captain America or having some significant opinion on it. I guess it's wrong for Bucky to have an opinion on someone who not only was an important symbol to the world that he grew up in, but also his best friend. And now all of a sudden, it's ridiculous for him to care just because someone else has replaced him. Why? The whole thing is clearly just a way to try to humiliate Bucky for having an opinion about anything. Sam offers to clear Sharon's name so that she can go back to America. She says no, but then he offers it a second time, and all of a sudden she just agrees. Why? They just gave themselves a partial roadblock, but they didn't really need to be there, so they wanted to hand wave it because otherwise the show can't happen. Every single person in the show is either neutered, incompetent, or just unreliable to such an extent that if they aren't just allowed to keep going through the story without any sort of stoppage, it's just, then it literally can't happen because no one has the ability to think or do anything without it being set up by someone else as a way to just hand wave any sort of problem in the show. They find out where the lab that the guy making the super soldier serum is working at, and somehow he doesn't hear them when they're talking or when they open the super loud creaking metal door. Who knows why? As Bucky, Sam, and Zemo are doing their thing, shaking down the dude, trying to get information and whatever, Shannon is just taking out these bounty hunters left and right. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. But for some reason, Bucky and Sam were literally incapable of doing anything even remotely productive while they were fighting Antifa. They just needed a way to have them figure out what to do without having them do any actual work to earn it. And that's the entire reason Shannon's in the show. She has no character development, no arc, there's no intrigue around her. She is literally just there to give away the plot. We learn that the doctor making the serum managed to somehow get his hands on some blood samples that had trace amounts of serum from Black Cap. That's literally the reason they put him in here. They put him in the show to allow them to have a starting point to work with while also making it about racism. They could have done this a smarter way. Maybe he got access to some really old notes from the doctor who made. He specifically says he managed to get blood sample that had trace amounts of serum because for some reason, I guess after 30 plus years of having the serum blood, it's just floating around in there like microplastics. It doesn't get absorbed or just happen to be as continuous metabolic function. It's literally just floating around in chunks and you can piece it together and not only that, somehow you can actually make it better because it gives you the power to stop making it visible, which is literally what they say. He says that it's more subtle. It doesn't make you more physically fit, but it does make you stronger, which is so that they can justify hiring a bunch of dumpy gingers to play supervillains who can somehow defeat an actual super soldier. And the guy who's playing the doctor, I don't know. The doctor is written absolutely terribly in this scene. He always has this weird super confidence as well as an ego, this maniacal tinge to him, oh, I'm so smart and amazing. You all are just peasants to me. Within a second, he will go to being a sniveling nerd. He goes from being this super confident, super villain type fucker, and then he goes to a cowering loser the second he remembers, oh, that's right, these people holding me hostage have a gun. He literally changes tone between sentences. And it destroys any sort of pacing and consistency within the show. We also learned that Princess Dindu stole the serum from this doctor, and then she later calls him for help because someone she cares about is dying. Why would you call someone that you just stole from who was connected to the very dangerous criminal underworld? The fact that she didn't just get offed for doing that is the biggest piece of plot armor I've seen in a while. And all of this is happening while Shannon is still out on the dock having a gunfight. And you never hear any of its sound from the fucking lab itself. It's completely soundproof. And this isn't some secret underground bunker. It's literally built into a cargo container. There's no reason they shouldn't be hearing this. Oh, and the cherry on top, They shoot the container with a rocket, but they don't fire it from a rocket launcher. They fire it from the barrel of a rifle. At 35 minutes, 25 seconds, you can see it shot from a rifle. I think what happened here is they wanted to have a sniper shoot through and hit someone, but then they changed it halfway through the production. But they didn't want to go through the process of giving him a missile launcher prop, so they just slapped it in to make it look so minimally passable, hoping that nobody would notice when it flashes on for like maybe 5 whole frames. And not only that, there's literally no recoil from the rifle. I mean, ignoring the fact that you couldn't fit the rocket in the rifle, and the fact that firing it from the rifle would make the rifle explode, there's also just no recoil when he does it. Because these people not only can't write a story, they also don't know how fucking physics works. Every single person in that small, contained little area who's on the exact opposite side of the rocket's explosion, completely fine. Nobody takes any serious damage whatsoever. Then, when they're escaping, Bucky can literally punch out a metal door, but he can't beat some fucking 125-pound, soaking wet communist super soldiers. They fight, they get away because the plot needs to happen, and then we get some big exposition dump about how disenfranchised everyone in Antifa is, as if they're not still actual terrorists. And it's clearly there to try to make you sympathetic with them. It doesn't work if you pay attention. Princess Dindu also just somehow knows that the doctor is suddenly dead, despite it happening literally seconds ago. She doesn't get a call or anything about it. She just immediately knows that it happened and tells another member of Antifa. We get this weird dump from Princess Dindu about how they're going to make the world a better place because they're literally just going to give the entire world to a bunch of children, and that will somehow make them better because they happen to be in refugee camps. Big ass air quotes right there. This is just another example where she thinks that just because the people that she's interacted with are somewhat disenfranchised to some extent, somehow the entire world needs to suffer or change overnight to make her feel better about something. I mean, she could do something like, say, start up a project to allow them to restart a part of civilization somewhere and just build a new life for all the people that she cares about, but she doesn't. She'd rather just steal from people and blow shit up. Then after they leave wherever they're fucking scoping out, we see Captain America and Battlestar investigating the prison where Zemo was broken out of. And apparently Captain America, who we're supposed to be rooting against for some reason, he is apparently the only person who put together that 2 people who were specifically looking for Zemo, who needed to talk to him, could have also been involved with breaking him out of prison. Okay, I guess. Once again, Captain America has gone from being a well-meaning guy to some glory-hungry hard-ass. I guess we're supposed to be rooting against him for some stupid reason. I mean, he's just trying to do his job and live up to what he thinks that Captain America is supposed to be. But he's the bad guy in this show for some reason. They slip in another scene on a plane where they're just talking about, oh, Black Cap, he was just such a big victim and everything sucks because racism. It is all so fucking tiresome. Like, I don't give a shit. He didn't try to make things better for himself. He had to literally be handed a way out. Now, let's remember, this is supposed to be some sort of empowering show for black people or whoever the fuck it is they think that they're trying to make look good in this. But in reality, you know what it tells us? It tells us the story of a guy who was given superpowers and was victimized because he was black, but he didn't want to put forth enough effort to make his life better and like break out and do something, because that's a great empowering message to people. That's right, black people are such enormous victims in the Marvel universe that they literally can't even fix anything themselves when they have superpowers because racism.
I hope you perish in flames.
Continuing the scene, we find out that Zemo has a place that they're going to be going to crash at. So for some reason, he waited till they were in the air to tell them that they were going someplace that he had access to. Why he didn't tell them beforehand is beyond me. Then we cut back to Antifa, and they decided to raid the place that they were scoping out. And Princess Dindu decides that tell everyone that they deserve to die because they had 6 months of supplies sitting around and they weren't giving it out because apparently Carly doesn't know how 6 months of supplies works. You don't just give them out all at once. You ration them for 6 months for the certain area that they're designated to. If you literally just get rid of them overnight, it's just going to be a wasted batch of supplies. Did literally no one think about this when they were writing this. After she goes on her little rant about how everyone is so evil because they didn't just literally throw away everything, she decides that she's going to respond in a reasonable fashion. She's going to kidnap them, lock them in a building, and then car bomb it.
Car bomb!
It's some like silence is violence type crap. Like, oh, if we don't do something extremely drastic and evil, people won't listen to us. Maybe people won't respect you and your message because you car bomb buildings and innocent soldiers. And the fucking episode ends. Oh boy, this one was... It just keeps going downhill. The show, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I have no idea how they managed to do it. Episode 4, I will admit, starts off on a pretty high note, but it's not exactly the kind of high note that they take full advantage of. It starts with taking a look at Bucky about 6 years previously in Wakanda when he's finally free of the Hydra programming, where one of the Dora Milaje decides to do a little test run where she recites the words in Russian that are to activate his Winter Soldier programming. And Sebastian Stan, he does a absolutely fantastic job at the emotional acting, like just in his like, it is peak. Ooh, it is so good. I loved it. Biggest complaint though here is the only thing we did not get to see from this scene that I think would have made this even better is some more flashbacks of him killing innocent people that would be intertwined / sprinkled in there with all the other stuff we've already seen in the movies. That would have made this scene just perfect. After that, we get back to the main show, and unfortunately, it's a whole lot more of the same. We pick up to the previous point in the episode that it ends on, where Bucky finds that the Dora Milaje have followed him, Sam, and Zemo because they're trying to arrest Zemo because, you know, he killed T'Chaka. And they want to exact revenge or imprison him or do whatever. This is set up for later, which then gets revealed later. Bucky informs the other two that they've been followed by the Wakandans, but they haven't followed him directly into the building that they're hiding out in. At least, that's what we're told. It turns out that that's wrong. Despite Bucky being, you know, a super soldier with who knows how many years of experience as the Winter Soldier, being able to keep himself from being tracked down. For some reason, he's super confident in his abilities, but we have no reason to believe that he has any reason to be confident because it ends up being that he's just wrong. Bucky gets an update on his phone from the news about how Antifa blew up a supply depot. They only managed to kill 3 people despite it being a very fiery car bomb that sets parts of the building on fire with at least 5 people on the inside, which seems like they're just trying to absolutely minimize the amount of casualties. Most likely to make Carly and Antifa the villains still, but not so much so that they have to actually make her an outstanding villain by, you know, blowing up, say, 30 people. Now, Zemo does something almost smart here. It was almost a good writing moment, but it devolves extremely quickly. He remarks how he has the will to do what needs to be done, obviously, you know, referring to killing Carly, but decides to somehow call her a supremacist of some sort.
Shut up, retard.
He then makes references to Ultron, Nazis, and the Avengers as if they are all the same thing, but they're not. They're quite significantly different. Carly and Antifa want the entirety of the world to completely give up on the idea of getting things back to normal and just literally hand out everything to all the people who just showed up overnight. Despite 4 billion people overnight most likely means that they did not have 4 billion people worth of supplies, be it food, medical equipment, homes, clothes, what the fuck ever it might be, and they just can't give it all away because who knows what was moved around in all the time that they were gone. Who knows what happened at any point during the middle of this. They just ignore that. He immediately transfers to the idea of a super soldier existing will somehow mess with people. I'm not sure what he means by this. Like, how does this relate to her being somehow a supremacist? She's not trying to make everyone a super soldier. She's not saying that super soldiers should have more rights or should be considered superior in some way or another. She's just using it as a way to force her will onto other people. And somehow, this led to a form of, quote, warped aspiration, which led to Nazis and Ultron and the Avengers. But he doesn't explain what that means. Because Ultron, the Avengers, and Nazis are all quite different. Ultron was designed to be a peacekeeping tool to basically protect the entire world by, as Tony would say, putting a suit of armor around the world. The Nazis were a group of actual racial supremacists who wanted to conquer and rule the entire planet. And the Avengers are a group of superpowered or super capable people who wanted to fight injustice and or international threats, but I don't see how he conflates being a supremacist with anything other than the Nazis in this situation, because Ultron was an idea that got out of hand. The Avengers kind of aren't so far, and the Nazis are just objectively evil people. Carly isn't just objectively evil, she's stupid, but she's not evil in the way that she can actually make anything other than short-term chaos. So whatever point he is trying to make here is effectively nonsense, because nothing here works together. Because Ultron, the Nazis, and the Avengers are not the same thing in any sort of sense, other than the fact that they are, in some way or another, a form of aspiration. After this scene where they basically just talk together and reestablish the same thing that we know already, that Carly and Antifa are terrorists, Sam is approaching this too soft, Bucky's kinda not involved, other than when the action actually starts, and Zemo is right to a certain extent. We cut to seeing them hiding out in some abandoned ruins, listening to the news, and we learn the GRC, the Global Repatriation Council, can somehow just make legislation that I guess will affect the entire planet. Okay, if that was the case, then Carly is in fact right. They can't really just set everything back to the way it was or allow everyone to start intermingling as if there is no difference in borders, laws, or any sort of sovereignty whatsoever. But that's not how this actually works, so why they were drafting up legislation makes no sense whatsoever. Even if they are a branch of the UN can't force its members to allow the UN itself to make laws for those individual countries. It's a weird detail to add in. Not only does it not make sense in the fact that people still have their own operational capabilities and limitations to some extent, but also it allows for this weird gray area that suggests that, yes, everything is fine and everything that Carly wants can actually be done, but for some reason it's just not, and we're going to have a pretty good reason why, but we're not going to actually explain how they could somehow still do it, but also not do it. I have no idea what they're trying to accomplish with this, other than try to keep everyone informed that the GRC has some form of political power. Also, we hear a confirmation that one of the people who was killed in the bombing is a father of two who had been working at the depot for just about a week. Keep that in mind for later. Afterwards, we're then treated to them going back to a sort of refugee camp / just meeting area where we see a bunch of people living together. And when Bucky and Sam get to that area, they are treated as lepers and actively avoided, which doesn't necessarily make sense because it's not as if Bucky and Sam are actively preventing people from being able to re-migrate or reintegrate into their homes or forcing them to live in these terrible conditions. If anything, these people should be asking them, it's like, hey, do you know if you can help us with this? What's going on? Why are we being forgotten? Why are we being left out? But nope, that doesn't happen. They just keep walking away. There's also this weird bit where, for some reason, they just have, like, fucking Antifa symbol all over the place on just random things they own. It's not a particularly good look for a supposed refugee camp to have a terrorist organization symbol just on everything they own. But okay. When Sam and Bucky are trying to talk to the people living in the camp, they get told that they don't trust outsiders, which is not true. Very shortly after this, we see that they most certainly do trust people who are outsiders because they trust Zemo. They just don't trust the Avengers for some reason. And then we get the same tired talking point from the rest of the show, and this is going to be a recurring theme. They're acting like they're the victim because the governments of the world don't literally just fix every single person's problem overnight because they're communists who think that for some reason the state has literally godlike abilities to change everything the second they need it to. After their little talk with the, quote, refugees, we see Zemo gain the trust of the children of the group who remember, we were told they don't like outsiders, but they like Zemo because he hands out candy to, like, the kids, which for some reason nobody ever tries to stop or investigate. I don't know, this is in Europe. Maybe they have a lot more high trust society. Maybe a strange man in a large coat coming up to people's children and just handing them candy isn't as weird there. I don't know. Then again, we get to hear Carly talk about her big old plight. It's the same thing. They're the victims because all their problems happen to not be overnight fixed. They ignore the part where it's 4 billion people. They don't acknowledge the part where she blew up a father of 2 to steal supplies, which they then will just throw away by giving out all at once. Doesn't talk about any of the people that were going to be getting those supplies no longer having access to it. They don't address the part where they've made no effort whatsoever to make things better for themselves by, say, starting up their own little homestead anywhere. No, they're just sitting around being sad and waiting for government handouts like a bunch of communists who have no sense of self-determination. And it's everyone else's fault because life is hard. Sam calls Sharon asking for help, and they bring up the power broker, and all of a sudden it's supposed to be this huge deal that the doctor making the serum is dead. Now they're in danger, but let's not forget that the power broker is exclusively located in Madripoor, which is a single city, and somehow we're supposed to think it's a big-ass threat. By the way, it's not. It's Sharon. It's not a big surprise. They're pretty bad at hiding it because she's one of the only people who ever talks about it, but she also seems to be the only person not actively affected by it. Afterwards, we go back to seeing Antifa, and they're hiding the serum in a stone of a monument to an actual war hero. And the goon with Carly uses this hero to justify the terrorism, and says that Carly is actually Captain America despite doing nothing even remotely like what Captain America does, just because she happens to be fighting against something that he believes is unjust. I'm not going to just keep going over this. We all know why it doesn't fucking work. They call Captain America's shield a symbol of freedom and justice, but it's actually bad because Carly doesn't like how it's being used because it's not doing what she wants it to do. Fucking cry more, commie. Cutting back to Sam, Bucky's, and Zemo, they get caught up with Captain America and Battlestar, and they find out from Zemo that there's this memorial going on, and they're going to go try to intercept Carly at it. And all of a sudden, when Captain America starts asking questions, Sam just knows that the person closest to Carly has died, makes her vulnerable, and might be willing to talk because of it. But Sam doesn't know this person. Sam doesn't know Carly's relationship with this person. I don't know why he says this. He has no reason to believe any of this. And then they slip in how someone having a dead friend / family member is the exact same as a soldier with PTSD. Because Carly has feelings, whereas, soldiers who watch people die in horrific accidents or atrocities are somehow the same as someone being sick. That seems a wildly immature way to downplay the severity of actual PTSD, but okay. Then there's a scene where the kids trust Zemo again because he gave them candy because they're dumb and they trust strangers. Then another scene of Carly grandstanding about her communist nonsense, this time on the fresh grave of her supposed friend. We don't actually know a whole lot about why she cares so much about this person, other than, she was somewhat raised with them, tangentially. We get a little bit of backstory between Carly and Sam when they're talking. Turns out that Carly and her friends were a bunch of squatters who refused to leave people's homes, and that somehow makes them a victim, and while also making it okay for them to bomb innocent soldiers because she's totally the good guy, and loss and hardship only matters when it happens to her and her friends. Okay. They bring up the supremacist argument between the two of them, and it still makes no sense. And Carly just keeps talking about how she's right and everything she does is good, until Sam pushes back even just a little bit and her argument falls apart in her own mind. So she realizes how stupid she is, but she's not going to actually do anything about it. She's just going to keep, killing people, stealing, doing whatever she feels like doing because she has this distorted view of what is right. But she's not actually going to take the time to acknowledge that, yeah, I agree that what he's saying about me is correct, but then I might have to change and admit I'm wrong, and I can't do that because I can't think rationally at all. A whole lot of fucking nothing happens, and then they start fighting once Captain America comes in to arrest her, and the wire work is terrible. Somehow, after literally walking through 2 rooms, Bucky just completely loses Carly. Okay. John catches Zemo, but not Carly because he just gives up and stops caring. Carly gets shot, just leaves her bullet in her wound because she's dumb. And again, it's just another scene with Carly and her fucking simps talking about how everyone sucks and is bad because racism, unless they agree with me, because I'm perfect in every way and I have no sense of critical thinking. Completely ignores the bullet wound. We need stakes here. But unfortunately, a bullet wound might detract from her fucking social grandstanding. They casually throw in another mention of the power broker. It doesn't fucking matter. They're literally reserved to a single city. It's just they are trying to make us care about this character so fucking much, and they don't fucking matter. It literally has no bearing on the story whatsoever. They all get separated and they go back to their respective little bases. And we hear Zemo talking about super soldiers again, because they are padding the time for every single one of these episodes by just having the same thing happen over and over again. Nothing ever actually happens except for like right at the beginning and right at the end. If you couldn't write a good show, don't make it like hour-long episodes. Just go with like 20 to 30-minute ones. It's not hard. I mean, you already couldn't commit to the standard 8 episodes. So what's so bad about just cutting down on all this extra bloat that doesn't fucking matter? Zemo talks about the super soldiers as, quote, gods amongst men. They're not. They aren't bulletproof. They all bleed. They can all die. Don't know what this weird fascination with him hating the idea of super soldiers. He didn't hate the super soldiers beforehand. He hated the Avengers because they failed to save his family, and he didn't want people looking up to them as if they would solve everyone's problems. We finally get a payoff with the Dora Milaje. They show up, try to arrest Zemo. Somehow Bucky, who was super observant beforehand, noticing that they were being followed by them, doesn't see that they got in somehow. So they wasted that whole plot point. Then we see, once again, the grown, very muscular men being absolutely humiliated and overpowered by the most frail-looking people on the planet. As the fight goes on, this super progressive, race-conscious show eventually devolves into black-on-black violence. Then the fight ends, Zemo escapes, and we go to see John and Battlestar being upset that they lost. Battlestar hypes up John again, talking about how great he is, but then they gotta throw in did some bad things in Afghanistan and stuff. Why? Can't like John. Can't like him for any reason. Gonna keep hyping him up, but not enough so that you can actually care about him. Then something quite strange shows up. Sarah, Sam's sister, gets called by Carly. They never explain how Carly got her phone number. They never explain why Sarah would answer the phone to a number she most likely doesn't recognize. And for some reason, she also doesn't tell the government that she was contacted by a terrorist and then threatened. And being the sister of an Avenger, and not just that, a member of the United States Air Force, you think they would take that a little more seriously if she did report it. She doesn't. Nothing comes of this. It is just a distraction and amounts to absolutely nothing. Sam goes to meet with Carly. She calls him and Bucky tools of the regime. Ignore the part where they were literally rebels and were arrested. They fight. Carly puts on a mask between shots because continuity is hard, I guess. Carly manages to send Bucky flying because he's never strong or competent when fighting actual villains. Someone throws a knife, it flies perfectly straight, which isn't how throwing knives work. Lamar gets tied up and just wiggles his knife near his cuffs. Couldn't even bother getting that bit right. Apparently, all the people who take the serum not only are super strong and capable of athleticism, they're also capable of doing gymnastics. There's just a part of the fight scene where some guy just starts doing flips and shit. And we have our first death of a somewhat main character. Lamar dies.
What you say? That you...
Because he hit a wall kinda hard. A lot of people hit walls kinda hard in this show. For some reason, he's the only person who dies. Antifa runs away. Captain America chases him down and kills him. For some reason, everyone immediately has their phones out. Nobody tries to stop him. Which, to a certain extent, that's, I guess, a bit believable. The show ends on the side of Captain America after he murders the Antifa member. And yeah, it was a brutal scene, to be sure. It was definitely going to be something that's going to ruin his reputation as Captain America. There's no doubt about that. But it's partially being played off as if Captain America killing someone is the big problem. Like he's Batman who doesn't kill, despite the fact that if you watch the Marvel movies, it is an undeniable fact that yes, Captain America has killed quite a few people over the years. Despite him starting off as such a well-meaning guy, within a few days he's this terrible butchering murderer. And that's where the episode ends. So, episode 5, we pick up almost immediately afterwards. John is running away and he's getting intercepted by Bucky and Sam. John is obviously freaking out because he just murdered someone in a pretty brutal way. But for some reason, they really amplify the ridiculousness of what they've been doing with John for the entire show so far. Where not only is he clearly upset after, his friend died and he murdered someone. They make him pull this, you saw what happened, I had to do it thing. And during the mix between him and the other two, he tries to equate what he did with Bucky by saying he's not him. And yeah, you're right, John. He's not you. Because what Bucky did, he was being brainwashed and mind controlled, while you just kind of had a freak out, which I get that they want to make John a unfit successor to Captain America. I get that. I really do, because, we all knew what was going to happen in this show, so one of these two was going to become Captain America. And if you've read their comics, or even just know somewhat what happens in the comics, it was obviously going to be Sam, which itself is kind of a problem that we'll deal with. After they start talking, he keeps freaking out, and they end up just fighting. The entire show, they've completely, utterly depowered Bucky, especially in his hand-to-hand ferocity, which it's not the first time in this. If you pay attention, Bucky is nowhere near a menace against just about anyone in the MCU, except in his first movie appearance, where he is not only a significant threat, but there's a good chance on multiple occasions that we could have seen Bucky kill Captain America. But, he doesn't, obviously, plot reasons. But it's 100% throughout this show that Bucky is not only not as competent or capable until he randomly is, but even when he is a somewhat competent threat to the people he's fighting, he ends up being very restrained and just overall, he's much slower. His attacks don't have anywhere near as much weight behind them. He's not as fast. He's not as accurate and deadly with firearms. Sometimes it just makes me think, why do we bother having him in this if he is going to be nowhere near as powerful as he should be? But anyway, they continue the fight. There's this weird thing where, despite vibranium being an enormous deal in the MCU, it being super resistant and capable of just about whatever they need it to be, Bucky's vibranium arm does this, not only glitch, but it electrocutes itself when he gets hit against the wall pretty hard for some reason, and it knocks him out of the fight for, the rest of the scene, and I have no idea why they would do that. This is quite a bit after John has taken the serum, because he found a singular vial of it after he found it on the ground after Zemo was trying to destroy all of it when he found Carly. And it's extremely heavily hinted that he took it. We don't actually see him take it, and he doesn't inject it or anything, and we're supposed to guess that he drank it, which I feel it wouldn't have anywhere near the same amount of weight behind it. I feel that would be more wasteful way to use it. It wouldn't have anywhere near the same effect. And besides the fact that we don't see him take it, he somehow seems to get the bonus of it by becoming significantly stronger and more capable in fights. But also, he doesn't actually seem to suffer any of the side effects from it, except maybe, I guess, the psychosis could be part of it, because, remember, it's supposed to be able to just amplify what already exists in a person. That's what they say in the first Captain America movie. So, sure, I guess, if we want to say his mood swings throughout the show drove him to be really crazy now, sure, I guess we could say that. But not only do we see in the first Captain America movie, as well as learning about it in Civil War, that when you take the super soldier serum, it takes a couple hours for it to really get into your system, and it's extremely painful to do it. But they handwave that in this show because they just skip over just about every detail they can whenever they need to. If you want to push back Lamar dying an episode or two, maybe him taking the serum could have been some big reveal to the other characters to make it more significant. But overall, this entire section feels rushed or just misplaced. This should have happened either later in the final episode or in the episode before this, because just the in-universe consequences of taking the serum are completely ignored and left out because they just didn't want to have to deal with them for this episode. As the show goes on, we get to hear more about the GRC, and it keeps being treated as if it's the entire governing body for the world as a whole, and if it has every single bit of power that any government could ever hope to have. They put a whole lot of emphasis on it, but the GRC doesn't actually ever seem to do anything. There's no actual action that we see take place. It's just things get told to us, but they don't show us. And as it sounds, that's just a failure of show don't tell, because we're supposed to believe this stuff is happening, but we're not actually supposed to rely upon it enough. During this time, this is all taking place during John's trial to be sentenced for, his crime, which, I don't think you could honestly treat this as a trial, because technically all he did was kill a terrorist. Yeah, it didn't look the best, and he would definitely go under some sort of psychiatric review from the government, but I don't think he would just be brought before a panel and charged. It just feels weird that the GRC is being treated as not only the world's government, but it's also supposed to be the person who oversees the actions of Captain America, which is, as the name suggests, a member of the military for America, not the military of the world, which is what the GRC would theoretically represent. During the entirety of the trial, John abdicates any and all responsibility because he doesn't like where he ended up afterwards, and he has no sense of responsibility, and he never says anything like, yeah, I messed up, but I think I can be better, please don't kick me off of Captain America right away. And this is supposed to be a guy who supposedly earns 3 medals of honor. Not only does he have no honor, he has no standards, he has no consistent characterization. Frankly, he just seems like a guy who shows up and does what he's told, and he was let off the leash one time, and he just went completely rogue. And when he's not fighting or being a part of the plot in some significant fashion, he's just always this mopey loser who has no consistency in anything he does. Nothing in his tone, the way he approaches conversations, how he acts around other people. Nothing ever feels natural or consistent with him. It feels like they wanted to simultaneously make him somewhat relatable but tragically flawed, but at the same time they also wanted him to be this comedically evil white dude who just can't handle any sort of power whatsoever. The trial ends, he leaves, he gets told that he needs to return the shield to the GRC. It doesn't belong to the GRC, it belongs to America, specifically the American military, and if anyone in particular, it would belong to Howard Stark, because you could make an argument that because it's vibranium and supposedly all the vibranium in the world is in Wakanda, that maybe he stole it, which they try to do. This random lady who shows up and basically says hey, you want to work for me now? Well, just do what I say and pick up the phone when I call you, but also don't give them the shield because it doesn't technically belong to them. It's just a fucking way to, hint that, oh, they stole it from Wakanda because colonialism and whatnot. And I looked into this because I don't remember them saying anything in the shows or the movies, but according to my research, in an episode of What If, we find out that no, the vibranium wasn't stolen. It was actually a gift from King T'Chaka of Wakanda to Howard Stark, which means it does in fact belong to Howard Stark. It doesn't belong to Wakanda. It doesn't belong to the GRC. So why they are trying to place this weird bit of dialogue that is a way to determine who owns the shield is really strange. Now, granted, this information I got from apparently an episode of Marvel What If, which, was made after this show. But if they're going to retcon it into there, why'd you bother putting it into this show in the first place? Because that seems like somewhat important information. So this whole thing they're trying to do with establishing ownership of the shield is really strange, because even they themselves don't actually know who owns it because they keep changing who owns it from property to property. Anyway, after we get that whole exchange between the random lady and John, we get to see the GRC has raided the little camp that Antifa and their friends were hiding out at, and they leave this big ass exposition dump note telling them why they raided the camp. I'm no expert on this kind of policy or these kind of individual instances, but I'm fairly certain that if the government raids a camp or breaks up a settlement, they don't leave behind a note. It just felt strange, and I don't know why they felt it was necessary to put it in. And then, after we get the exposition dump, we get another one of Carly's rants about how terrible the world is and how downtrodden she and her friends are, despite her being part of an international criminal organization who allows her supporters to harbor her in very public areas, which then makes those people accomplices, and then she acts like the government enforcing the laws, which include arresting people who harbor criminals, people who they supposedly cared about get arrested, and then she complains that because the lady who was just supposed to act like she had a relationship with, despite us hearing the most minimal amount of detail, almost no detail whatsoever, because that lady died because she was either sick or old, and the guy who attacked the cops by just running at them and allowing himself to get shot, somehow that is paying with their damn lives to live on this planet. it. And we're supposed to pretend like somehow that's justified. She goes around, she commits a bunch of crimes, she involves a bunch of extra people in those crimes. Then when those people get caught and arrested for participating in those crimes, just because she thinks she's doing something good despite providing effectively no positive outcome that we can actually see, that means everyone else is the bad guy. She just keeps doubling down. No, she is fucking tripling down on terrorism and acting like it's everyone else's fault for noticing because she's a fucking retard. Then we get a quick scene. Zemo gets handed over to the Dora Milaje. Then, for some reason, Sam decides he's going to bring Captain America's shield with him to go see Isaiah. And Isaiah tells him to leave it in the bag because the Stars and Stripes don't mean anything good to him. My question is, if you have such a problem with the idea of the Stars and Stripes, the American government, and everything America stands for, why the fuck haven't you left? Why would you willingly stay in a place that you hate or that made you miserable, where you feel victimized to the point of isolating yourself in your house and on your property because the place is so unsafe for you that you can't risk going outside because you're worried you'll be taken back to prison? I'm going to stop attempting to justify this because it's very obvious that most people didn't think this through when they were making it. So let's just keep going. While he was in captivity / part of the military program or what the fuck ever, the government held Black Cap's letters because they needed a way to make the government more cartoonishly evil in his backstory. Then we hear about more of the torture / experimentations on him. It's pretty general stuff. Then we learn that he can bust out the facility to go save his friends, but he couldn't go on the run while he was out because contrived nonsense. And he keeps talking about how much of a victim he is and acts as if being a victim in this day and age wouldn't make him immediately famous and shield him from any form of repercussion for telling his story to the world. And he acts as if he's still living under like the most harshest Jim Crow era, super black subjugation era of fucking America. But yeah, I don't know if this is supposed to be empowering. When you think about it, fucking Isaiah, his entire story is I got victimized and then I let that victimization completely dictate how I live the rest of my life because I didn't want to move on past it. He just stewed in his trauma and he refused to say, alright, I'm going to move on past this. I'm going to make things better. I am going to stand up for other people. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to make sure that this shit doesn't ever happen again. No, he doesn't do that. He just hides away in his house and acts as if like nobody would ever care about him. I guess he doesn't hear about the news, be it through the radio, the TV, the internet, or what the fuck ever. Being a victim is half the reason people are getting ahead. It is so childishly tone deaf and unfathomably ridiculous that of all people, we have to listen to Black Captain America, a man with super strength, about how he literally didn't have the option or capabilities to make his life better just because he was black. Does Disney think that this is a good example? Guy who just sat around stewing in his sadness, refusing to make anything of himself, and just giving up on life. Frankly, this seems more racist than anything else because, even with superpowers, you can't do anything with your life because you're black and everything sucks and you should just give up and hold up in your little house because you can't accomplish nothing. It's fucking ridiculous.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
Then for the first time in 2 or 3 episodes, Sam and Sarah finally go back to their boat and start doing something with this plot line. And it's only now, like, they're about, say, a week or so from being destitute, from being unable to pay for their boat and maintain their business. But it's only until now they decide, hey, let's cash in all those favors that mom and dad had. Why? What? You went to the bank, got turned down, and didn't immediately turn to these? Why would you do this? You had like an entire town full of people who owed your family favors, and you just completely gave up on the idea of cashing those in? Why? This was supposed to be Sam's like real life problem that he's trying to get fixed. He doesn't go to Pepper, ask them, hey, can you guys help me pay for repairs to my boat so my sister and her kids don't lose the business and can keep surviving? No, he doesn't do that. Apparently, he can't pay for it with the money he makes from military contracts and being a part of the military. And he's got this wealth, goodwill built up with his family. People who he spends time with down at the docks, and they just do nothing with it until they're almost destitute? Why? Why would you do that? Sam, are you like actually fucking stupid? We get to see Bucky. He lifts like a half-ton engine, but for some reason he can't knock back a 100-pound girl. then while he's there, Bucky brings him a upgraded suit of wings, including a new red wing, and now it's all vibranium. And sure, I guess you could say they had this laying around. Ugh, it's just... Why did you wait till now to do this? This felt like something you could have cashed in a while ago. I think this was just a way so that they could try justifying the new costume. Just personally, I hate the new costume that we see him wear later. After their montage and after the quick hand waving of any problem that Sam had initially that they just ignored for most of the series, we get to have them talking about the Shield's legacy as they throw it around the targets in their yard. It's always the Shield's legacy that they talk about. They don't talk about Steve's legacy, what made him a good Captain America, what made him worthy of carrying the Shield, what made him worthy of being the icon that he was. It's always just the Shield. It's not the person. Steve is supposed to be this absolute paragon of virtue. He's supposed to be the type of superhero that the world needs and the person that could stand up and be willing to do what is right, even if it's not necessarily popular. And that's great. That's a fine thing. But they don't ever talk about that. They don't talk about moral foundations. They don't talk about anything about Steve. It's always just the Shield. And then, as they keep going on and they're talking to each other, they have Sam just blatantly explain every problem that Bucky has and everything that Bucky has been conflicted about. And they just do it to line it all out and get this little side issue out in the open and dealt with right away. Because apparently, Bucky can't think like an adult and make his own conclusions. It's just a way for them to humiliate him or basically say like, oh, you're not good enough and here's why, blah 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 blah. And like, watching this, you just get the feeling that not only do they not know what to do with Bucky, they also just have absolute contempt for his existence. Then we get to cut back to Antifa and Carly again. Fucking yay, these characters won't fucking die. And they're just standing out in the open. They're international terrorists. They've been spotted all over Europe, and nobody notices them. No one ever notices them. I'm sure they scrubbed their image from the web, supposedly, but nobody ever thinks, oh, hey, those people look familiar. Aren't they criminals? We should make a call about them. I mean, even the Avengers had the decency to pretend to dress up in more casual clothes to disguise themselves. Here, they don't even attempt to try. And then they set off this little ping on their app because they still have an app up and it wasn't taken down or blocked or tracked or restricted or anything like that. And when they set off this ping, apparently every single individual person, literally everyone around them, is a part of Antifa. But none of them were tracked. None of them have been investigated. Nothing has ever happened to any of these people whatsoever because that would mean actions have consequences. And we'd have to remember that, oh, right, the government is still looking for these people. Then they talk about how the GRC sending people back to their homes and reestablishing people's lives is a bad thing somehow for still doing this fucking stupid ass plot point. And not only that, but when the vote starts going down for whatever legislation they're trying to pass or talk about, every single person in the building with them is a member of Antifa because apparently nobody has done any background checks on these people. Nobody has any security routines whatsoever. They just let themselves get infiltrated and absolutely nothing fucking comes of it. Every single person is a compromised member. And this begs the question, if Antifa is so widespread and supported by so many people to the point where like any fucking scene where they need a small army or even just like a large group of people to influence what is going on in the plot can just appear out of nowhere whenever they need it to, how is it that they haven't won already? I don't understand how you can have that much influence and that much support without already winning, especially if everyone is supposedly not only on your side, but completely against whatever you're fighting. Then the fucking episode ends. We only got one more episode, I promise, then we'll be done with this fucking show. Episode 6, the very last one. Yay! We pick up right after the group of Antifa shows up at the GRC meeting, and we just get right into it. For some reason, there are no cops in the building. Not a single one, because every member of security in the building is a member of Antifa, and we just have to deal with it. Before we get too deep into this, I want to point this out. I don't know if they just didn't give her any direction whatsoever, or if she's literally incapable of producing any form of emotion, but Carly has, like, 3 faces. She's either sad, defiantly angry, or shouting. And she does it the entire show. It's always one of those 3. There is no emotion for it. I have not the foggiest clue why they couldn't have made her at least emote more. She feels like a piece of drywall that fell down, and you look at it from any direction, and the only thing you see is the general shape of it. There's no actual details. There's nothing to tell you anything about it. It's just blank and stiff. And that's all it is. Bucky meets up with Sharon. Sharon's got this digital mask thing that Black Widow had from Captain America and Winter Soldier. And she just takes it off right in public. And she is surrounded by like 20 or so guards. And they try to hand wave and say, oh, well, they're not going to be looking here. It doesn't matter if they're looking for you. If you are such a wanted criminal that you cannot come back to the States because you would be arrested on sight, which is what we were told throughout the entire show with her, it doesn't matter if you show up at a police situation that doesn't exclusively revolve around them looking for you. You're still a wanted criminal. And there's like 30 plus cops just in this one scene. And they are doing absolutely nothing. Some of them aren't even pointing at the same building as the others. Sharon doesn't have any purpose in this story. Even after we get the official big reveal that she's the power broker, it means literally nothing to the story. Then we just go back to the actual action, and we see that Antifa is masking up as they attack the GRC. They've thrown this little ball that makes like this tear gas going around the area, and it's scaring everyone. And it's scaring / corralling people into certain areas. For some reason, though, Antifa is not coughing or even like out of breath because they're wearing a hockey mask. That's not how a hockey mask works. There's no filtration. It's literally just plastic. And besides, it doesn't even matter that they put on a hockey mask because literally everyone in the building saw their faces because they were part of basic security. They didn't even have the guts to make them take out the security using their super soldier powers. They just made them part of security so they could handwave the entire thing. This show is handwave the show. Nothing has any consequences. Nothing takes any significant criticism. It's just thought up and immediately slapped on into the plot. It's fucking ridiculous. Afterwards, Sam just shows up as Captain America finally, and then for some reason we get this really stupid banter between him and Batroc because they remember that Batroc exists and he's finally doing something in this show again. And during the whole evacuation of the GRC members, is after Sam starts being a hero finally and actually being competent enough to neutralize enemy targets, we see Carly is talking on the radio, communicating with her minions. And she's in plain clothes, out in the middle of the area, close enough that she can have the flashes of lights going on her face as she talks, and for some reason, no one notices her. She's not picked out, and for some reason, despite locking down an extremely important building with a bunch of extremely important people in it, the cops are not monitoring radio or phone chatter for some reason, so she never gets found out. And during this time, we're getting back and forth shots between not only what's going on with the GRC, but also what's going on with Carly, what's going on with Bucky, what's going on with Sam. We're doing all these different things. And with the GRC, we see that some of their members of like the military, oh, by the way, there's military guys here. Where were they? Why didn't they stop Antifa when they invaded the actual meeting area? No one knows. They don't even tell us. They don't even acknowledge that it's weird that it happened. And not only that, Bucky sees the guy coming in and moving with the crowd of people that are trying to evacuate, but he doesn't say anything about it to anyone who could hear him other than Shannon, and he just lets them keep going. Why? While the entire evacuation is going on, we see that Bucky is walking around. He doesn't go after the guy that he somehow knows is a member of Antifa. He doesn't go to stop him or do anything like that. He's just walking around doing nothing. Who the fuck knows why? This is just shit that happens. Nobody points out, it's like, hey, fucking Antifa's up there messing with Captain America, Winter Soldier, you should go up there and help him. Nope, just completely ignores it, and he's just walking around. And Carly gets on the phone, calls some random lady, and the lady just hands her phone to Bucky saying that it's Carly. Bucky doesn't ask her why she has a direct phone line to Carly. He doesn't ask her why it is that he does not try to arrest her. He doesn't hold her for questioning. He doesn't do anything. And he just accepts that she has a phone for him to talk to the villain. And then he picks it up, starts talking to it. And Carly brings out her fucking absolute trademark big brain here and just starts doing this whole, you're on the wrong side of history. Aren't you tired of fighting for something that doesn't care about you? I'm fighting for something bigger. Bucky, why are you listening to her? This isn't going to tell you anything, and you don't have any way to like track her and locate her, and even if you did, this fucking show wouldn't let you use it. Fucking hang up the phone and just go find the cops, tell fucking Carly Morgenthau is here, go find her. And Carly just pulls out this random passive-aggressive bitchiness when he doesn't immediately turn over to her side because she's a fucking child. And then we get to the scene where Antifa is just, or at least the guy working with Antifa, is down in the garage getting all the people loaded into the armored trucks. And for some reason, this guy has a gun, by the way. Nobody is going to stop him, and apparently nobody has noticed him yet, but somehow Bucky did. They don't tell us how. And for some reason, he just puts this big-ass, like, fucking super lock on the back doors. Nobody notices it. Nobody calls him out on it. Nobody tries to do anything about it. And not only that, the guy who has a gun at the time, and he's looking directly at the people that he is trying to work against, and he doesn't just start blasting. Nobody in this show does anything with their resources or the opportunities they get, unless there is some way they can use it to grandstand about their nonsense, or they can just fucking slap down onto the main characters. It is so fucking tiresome in this show. Then, we finally go back to Sam and his fight. He just leaves. He leaves the fight with Batroc and then just fucks off. Turns out that the helicopter pilot who's taking away some of the GRC members is also a member of Antifa. And not only that, he pulls out his phone and on speaker tells whoever's on the other end that he's going to the rendezvous point. No one in the helicopter notices this. Nobody says anything about it, tries to get out. They just let it happen. And somehow, not only that, the person on the speakerphone can supposedly hear him over the sound of the helicopter. There's no special microphone attached to it. It's literally just him holding the phone. And while he's talking, you can hear the motor going and the helicopter starting to spin up. And no one does anything about it. Nobody acknowledges it. Dude, whoever you called, first off, they can't fucking hear you. What's to stop people in that helicopter, if they have a weapon, from taking it and fucking blowing your head off because you're obviously trying to kidnap them? You literally just telegraphed it. And it keeps going. The scene just keeps going. And we start watching Sam chase this fucking helicopter. And this helicopter takes like a 90-degree turn right away and doesn't just insta-crash and lose control. Like, they don't even know how helicopters work. It's not like it takes a pretty hard turn and kind of drifts away. No, it's like immediately dives to the ground. Like, it has perfect movement no matter what it does. And despite there being this enormous cop presence around and people watching Captain America go onto this helicopter, which is very obviously taken over by a hostile force, because no actual reasonable person would believe that someone who is evacuating people would immediately dive the helicopter towards the ground, immediately pull up, and actively try to avoid Captain America flying around. Nobody shoots them down. Nobody tries to come up next to them. Nobody does anything. You don't even see them call in, say like, hey, the helicopter's been hijacked. The show just keeps going on. It ignores any implications for this enormous telegraph. Then, cut to Carly. More commie nonsense. Next! We cut back to the chase in the helicopter, and finally, a cop helicopter shows up and just starts flying directly towards the helicopter that Sam was already chasing, and then collides with it and starts to crash. The other one doesn't. Only this one. That's it. We're moving on. Antifa intercepts the trucks that are going away with some of the members, causes them to crash, starts setting them on fire and shit, as if some of the people driving it weren't very obviously part of their group. You know, seeing another member put a giant and super obvious lock over it and doing absolutely nothing about it. Okay. Something miraculous happens. Carly grabs the dude's gun and breaks it in half like it's made of Legos. I wish I was joking. Like, literally just pulls it over, breaks it in half. I don't care if you have super soldier serum. I don't actually believe you could do that. If anything, why don't you just do what we've seen them do in previous Captain America properties, where you literally just take the fucking slide off? It would have accomplished the same thing, and it wouldn't look so fucking retarded. When Bucky finally gets around to trying to save the burning trucks, he literally just ignores the lock. It's very obvious lock. It's this big fucking crab-looking thing. And he just ignores it. Now, let's remember, Bucky's robotic arm, especially in Winter Soldier, was extremely strong. He could do all sorts of shit, but he can't hear because they fucking depower him for no fucking reason. Then, our hero, John, shows up, and he's no longer Captain America. He's just like his own little thing at this moment. And he starts fighting and contributing, and he's like kind of almost making a difference. And the conversation between fucking John and Carly devolves into, I'm paraphrasing here, Lamar's black life didn't matter. John gets into the fight and gets all super serious. Remember, this guy's got 3 medals of honor, but for some reason, wild flailing communists can just beat him down. Okay, then we go back to the fucking chase with Sam. And Sam gets hit with the blades of the helicopter as a way to send him plummeting towards the ground. Yeah, sure, it hits the shield. He's fine. The chopper blades are not, though. They don't show this because they're idiots and they don't know how cause and effect works in this show. But it doesn't matter if it's fucking vibranium shield. The fucking helicopter blades are not. It takes literally no damage. It doesn't deform or crash or anything like to show that it just slammed super hard into vibranium for no reason. When Sam is getting out of the water using his fucking jetpack and whatnot, the ADR is fucking ass. But honestly, I'm willing to give it a pass because I thought it was kind of funny.
Boy, you just earned this ass whooping!
Afterwards, Sam coordinates with one of the people in the helicopter because they have experience with piloting helicopters, and this whole thing is fine. Most of it's fine. The only problem is, for some reason, there's no sound of a helicopter going around in the hall, which, you know, is why people have to wear those earmuffs when they're in helicopters so that they can talk to each other, because they aren't exactly, like, soundproof. And after it's all saved, we finally get to watch someone fighting against Carly, and they're not a pushover. They're, like, holding their own until they remember, oh, wait, this is Carly. She can't actually be losing for any reason. And then he's immediately a pushover. Yay. And then finally, afterwards, we get to see John actually do something Captain America-esque, just so Sam can swoop in at the last second and steal his fucking thunder. And the civvies, they're super on board with it. They love him. They call him Captain America after they call him Black Falcon. They tried to do this once before on the show, calling him Black Falcon instead of just Falcon. Nobody calls him Black Falcon. It was literally so they can make a race-based comment. It's like, oh, why am I Black Falcon? Is it because I'm black? And then they point out how stupid it is. Yeah, okay. Whatever. Oh, no, that's not Black Falcon. That's Captain America. I mean, like, why were the civvies even near this area? Oh, shouldn't they have been, like, cordoned off or at least be running away from it because something big and violent is going on in that area? And most people don't want to be near that because they might get hurt and there's not a whole lot they can do to protect themselves in this. After all the members of the GRC in the truck are safe, we start this little confrontation between Sam and Carly. And he immediately takes out every member of Antifa, backing her up with one bounce on each of them. You couldn't have let literally anyone... You could have done something like had them getting whittled down by Bucky or John on the way there. And, you know, maybe have Sam finish off the, like, last one or two people. But no... He hits like 5 people in one go, just so that she doesn't have backup at the moment. And when they're all taken out, Carly immediately tries to fucking guilt Sam for being the new Captain America, just because he's black, acting like she knows literally anything about him. Yes, he bought into it, he's a fucking hero, you self-righteous carrot-top commie. Then Batroc shows up again. They remember that he's here. He got quite far in the city relatively fast, and he's got a grenade launcher, and instead of using frag grenades, he starts firing smoke grenades for some reason. And then Sam lets everyone escape, despite having thermal vision, so he would be able to see them through the smoke. Carly gets away, and then she gets intercepted by Sharon. And we get this whole big expedition dump about how she's the power broker. Yay, we all fucking knew that was super obvious. Sharon lets her pull up her own gun and doesn't just drop her the second that she sees Carly going for her gun.
Mama says my turn on the Xbox.
And then Batroc shows up, finds out that she's the power broker, and threatens to tell people who the power broker is instead of just threatening to kill her while he's the only one pointing a gun at them after the two of them decide that they're going to put their guns down. And then he just lets them shoot him. The entire scene goes on for far too long. It's a whole bunch more nonsense, and it adds absolutely fucking nothing to the situation. Then Sam, he finally catches up with her, and he could do what he did the last time he caught up with them. Just fucking donk her right in the face and end the whole thing, but decides he wants to negotiate with the terrorist. Cut to the other members of Antifa. They're running, and apparently Bucky and John can catch them now because they just download the app and find out where the app tells them the rendezvous point is, and everyone gets arrested. Why the fuck they didn't do this the last 5 episodes? No one knows. This is after 20 minutes of the cops throughout this entire episode doing literally nothing. Like, it takes 20 minutes for them to do the most minimal work. Cut back to the fight with Sam and Carly. Fucking nothing is happening. He launches himself into the ceiling for absolutely no reason. And he's just refusing to fight now for whatever reason. He's not trying to buy time for someone. He's literally just refusing to participate in the fight at all. He could have launched one of his little Red Wing drones and have her get shot in, like, say, the thigh or, like, the ankle or something, just to, knock her down. But no, he has to just wait for Sharon to come in and do it herself, because Sam's a fucking cuck in this show. And they play her dying as if we're supposed to be sad about her, like she was some relatable or well-written character. She wasn't. I don't fucking care. I want this show to be over. Then Sam carries her off, and the reporters show up, and they ask about fucking generic labels for random things instead of anything important related to the actual situation. You couldn't even write the scum of the earth journalist well. Then fucking Sam just starts talking with the members of the GRC. I've been over this plenty of times already. They're basically saying that, that they're the bad guys because they're not just letting people do whatever they want, go wherever they want, take all the things from people that reappeared again. They aren't just letting fucking anarchy go around the world with fucking 4 billion people showing up overnight. Sam tries to say that Carly and the rest of Antifa weren't terrorists, despite them stealing humanitarian supplies, blowing up a government building, killing the people inside, attempting to assassinate multiple government officials, and somehow they're not terrorists because they weren't holding guns while they were doing it. Then there's the whole, you've got to do better, Senator. And he's just, Sam makes some mildly good points about how they can make major decisions with a phone call, an email, and whatnot. And you know what? Good point, Sam. It doesn't apply here because whatever you're bringing up to say that they can do with those phone calls and emails does not apply here. It's 4 billion people who showed up in less than a whole second. How is it that you managed to find a way to criticize the government, but you somehow made the government sound correct about this? He tries to conflate the cosmic event of Thanos snapping and the Avengers undoing the snap, and basically he tries to say that along with the governments trying to reintegrate 4 billion people are the exact same thing effectively. I don't think anyone, be it the writers or any of the characters, actually understand what is happening in this universe. And when the government starts making some decent point, pointing out the holes in his logic, he brings up his fucking race for no reason. In fact, he says that he actually suffers from being Captain America just because he's black. It is just fucking hollow, virtue signaling nonsense about how everything is so bad and awful for him just because of the color of his skin. And because of that, everyone should just give away billions of homes, livelihoods, because more racism. And let's just hope that all works out, that nothing bad comes from any of this. Sam ignores every single person on the planet who could be negatively affected by whatever he wants them to do. Then they go back to saying that Carly's the victim because nobody asked Carly why she was stealing supplies, blowing up buildings, or doing what she was doing because she was negatively affected. So that somehow makes her a victim. And by this same logic, African warlords that just go around stealing from villages before they fucking massacre them are also victims. It's because nobody asked them why they were doing it, so they must have been doing it for a good reason. When Sam is going through this whole scene, he's always talking about, the government needs to do more. The government just needs to make things happen overnight. As if there was not thousands of years of history that tell us that when the government just does things with a wave of its hand, it always works out terribly. At no point does anyone in this show, when they're talking about this, consider doing things on their own without waiting for the government to come in and do it for them. No one takes the resources and abilities they have and makes something good out of a situation. Everyone just sits around waiting for everything to be taken care of for them. And he finishes off his little rant to the government by basically saying, do what people want you to do the second you want them to do it just because it's popular, or they'll kill you. Then we see Sharon again. She's ignoring her wound and just walking around like nothing happened. She's surrounded by cops, still not arrested for some reason. They talk, it's nonsense, it doesn't fucking matter. Then we see that Antifa is finally getting arrested. Zemo's butler finally does something other than just pilot the plane. He fucking finishes them off. Then the plotline with the random lady who showed up after John's trial gets resolved, and it turns out he's just going to become U.S. agent. That's fine, sure, whatever, we can do that. If they're going to keep him around, I just hope they don't fucking waste him or make him this bumbling, inconsistent idiot. Who am I kidding? They're probably going to make him a bumbling, inconsistent idiot. And finally, after like 5 previous episodes, Bucky finally finished the storyline where he has to go talk to his friend whose son he killed when he was the Winter Soldier. And once again, it's pretty well acted. But we don't see a whole lot of detail with it, so they kind of just half-assed it when they finally got around to it. And we also hear that Yep, everything worked out the exact way that Harley wanted it to. The GRC just gave up on the whole send people back to where they came from so they could restart their lives. So now the world has 4 billion homeless people. 4 billion people lost their homes, they lost their jobs, they can't go back now, all because they just decided we're not going to try to help you anymore. And we get the last visit with Sam and Isaiah. And then they just talk more about more racism, victimization, blah, 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 blah. And we find out that Sam managed to get Isaiah a monument in the Captain America Memorial / Museum. They ignore the part where suddenly he can be seen in public without risking getting himself in trouble, which is the whole reason why he was hiding out in his house. I mean, sure, it's a nice gesture and all for a character whose existence is fucking stupid, but wouldn't it have been a more impactful thing to have Sam get all the cameras that he can in a press conference, and then Isaiah could just tell his story, not just leave it on a out of focus fucking plaque in a museum that most people probably won't go see? Then the show ends after all this fucking mess, but then there's an end credit scene. So the end credit scene is Sharon gets her pardon. That's right, Sharon, this one lady who was a fugitive from America, gets a pardon from a senator on a council. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's not how pardons work. And immediately after she gets it, she goes out into the public area, pulls up her phone, and calls one of her fucking minions and basically says, by the way, now I'm going to start selling government secrets after I've got all my clearance back. I sure hope that this will have zero repercussions, and hopefully this very well monitored government facility doesn't have cameras pointing out here with audio in it so that people can hear me making this conspiracy to commit treason again. Why was Sharon even in the show? Sharon's existence in the show is downright stupid. She's not a mainline character, she's a B character at best. And now that she's got her fucking clearance back without earning it, once again, they just hand wave this. She's just clear to work again. She hasn't actually gotten anything back. Like, she's not actually working in S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever the new version of it's going to be. So the fact that she calls her assistant or whoever right away and basically says, hey, we have a lot more to offer now, while she's most likely being filmed by security systems. If this works out and she actually gets to go through with this plan, then fucking literally nothing has consequences in this universe anymore. Because if you can just get away with openly admitting that you're about to abuse your high-level clearance for profit and you never get caught, then fucking nothing in this matters anymore. This show's biggest issue, more than its terrible plot, more than its absolutely garbage message, worse than its fucking political grandstanding, worse than anything else you can find in the show, is the fact that they just completely destroyed any redeeming qualities that Sam and Bucky had, as well as destroying any reason you might have to root for them or care about what's happening to them as characters. Bucky started off the series being able to have somewhat understandable motivations. He wants to redeem himself, not only by finishing off his little list, but also by proving to himself that Steve was right about him and that he can't be redeemed, while having to struggle with the idea with Sam giving up the shield and refusing to be Captain America initially. Maybe Steve was wrong about that, and then Steve might be wrong about Bucky. And they do nothing with this. This goes absolutely nowhere. They don't ever do anything to explore this. It's mentioned there slightly and used as a way to justify him being snarky and bicker with fucking Sam. Bucky could have been like a fantastic redemption arc. He doesn't have to be new Captain America. He could have been his own thing. He could have been Winter Soldier, White Wolf, or whatever you wanted to do with him. And it could be something like he doesn't deserve praise, or at least he doesn't believe he deserves praise, no matter what good he does, because he did so much bad as the Winter Soldier. It is just an enormous wasted opportunity, and it sucks because Sebastian Stan is a great actor. He portrays emotions well, he does physical acting well when he's not being purposely depowered for whatever reason. You could have done so much with him, and they just squandered that chance. And despite all of their talk of racism and legacy with Isaiah in Falcon, they ended up making kind of a more racist story because Sam was his own hero. He was his own thing. He wasn't Captain America. He was Falcon. He had his own gimmick. He had his own identity, and he was different enough that he could be associated with Captain America without being a direct weaker copy to him. Instead of building up Falcon as a character, building his reputation as a superhero, and becoming his own symbol, he gets the hand-me-downs of Captain America and basically just gets to replace Chris Evans as Captain America. He doesn't get to be his own thing. He doesn't get to shine. He doesn't get anything of his own. He only gets the hand-me-downs because apparently the writers don't think that he's good enough as an individual to explore or to expand upon whatsoever. I like Falcon. I also liked Winter Soldier. I thought they were cool. Sure, they were kind of there in the background, and they didn't have a whole lot of screen time compared to everyone else. But since they had such a large roster, and we all knew eventually that the main original Avengers cast was going to be removed from the series, or at least put into the background, neither of these characters are given the opportunity to be themselves, to make something of their own, to make their own stories, or to make their own legacy. They are always being directly connected to Captain America, while at the same time doing absolutely nothing to connect them with Captain America as a character. They always treat him as a symbol or some vague concept that you either are or you aren't. At no point do any of them say anything along the lines of, what makes Captain America a good symbol? What makes Captain America a person that people will look up to? What makes him a hero? It is always just symbol, symbol, symbol. It's always what the shield is being used for or who it's being used by. John is never given a chance to actually do anything as Captain America without it either being pulled away from him right away or without it being twisted so that it can be used to humiliate him. They don't do anything like, say, have him have a couple successful missions and people start to like him because he looks like Captain America and seems to be doing all the things that most people who don't know anything about Captain America himself would actually do. Then you could work with the two characters and they could notice him doing things that Steve wouldn't normally do, or it's always just he either gets angry for no reason or he has to get humiliated for trying at all. This show took so much potential, and they squandered it at every chance they got. We have 3 Captain America or Captain America adjacent heroes now. These are people who are most likely going to be around for the foreseeable future if the Marvel Cinematic Universe keeps going. And from what I hear, supposedly the MCU is going to be saved by having Kevin Feige overhaul everything. He's going to get rid of all the activists and get back to basics because he wants this to work out well. Now, whether or not that happens is something only time will tell for us, but I really do hope that it does actually get better. Get back to what the MCU used to be, where it was good characters, good action scenes, and movies that were fun to watch. And while they weren't perfect, you liked them enough that you just kept coming back. I am actually a really big fan of the superhero genre. It is so disappointing to see how bad the MCU has gotten ever since Captain Marvel came out. I do know for a fact that there are 2 properties that these characters are going to be showing up in relatively soon. It's going to be the Thunderbolts and Captain America Brave New World. Now, half of the cast for the Thunderbolts is for the Black Widow movie, which I have not seen yet, but from what I understand, isn't particularly very good. And based on the trailer, from what I can tell, they're trying to make their own version of the Suicide Squad. A bunch of anti-heroes or villains working together for whatever reason. And it's taking people that normally wouldn't be associated with a team environment, putting them all together. And sure, that's fine. I'm actually kind of interested in seeing it. Based on the trailer, it looks like it could be okay. Whether or not it is, that's a different story. And since Bucky and John are going to be in it, hopefully they can actually do something with their characters. I really hope they do, because I just don't like seeing characters that I actually kind of enjoyed or like the idea of being active punching bags for everyone and everything that they're even remotely connected to. Now, with Brave New World, I don't have as much good hopes, and according to some articles involving test screenings, a lot of people aren't liking it. And they're finally doing something with Secretary Ross. Unfortunately, the actual actor who played him is dead, so Harrison Ford is going to be playing him from now on, and we're actually going to finally get Red Hulk, which that combined with the fact that the guy who plays Gus Fring from Breaking Bad is going to be in it, and everything I've seen him in is pretty good, or at least all the roles he's in are pretty good from what I've seen. So I might see that. Now, I'm not delusional. I know that there's a very slim chance that things are going to get better from this. Not only just because it's been going downhill for so long, but also it's very obvious that people have gotten their superhero fatigue, and the genre is most likely going to be dying out sometime soon. And you know what? If that happens, oh well. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Oh man, this guy's so handsome and cool. I want to subscribe.